Welcome back to Iron Fate Stories. How is your day going today? Today, we're diving once again into incredibly exciting and thrilling stories about bikers. If you enjoy the content, please like, share, and subscribe to get notified about the latest stories. Enjoy the show.
Poor boy gave up his seat on the last bus to a tired nurse. The Harleys were already there. The bus doors wheezed shut like they were sealing a tomb, and Evan knew he just made the kind of choice you don't get to take back. The last bus of the night, the only one, the one his boss had warned him about, laughing as he tossed him the extra mop shift like it was nothing. The one Evan had sprinted 3 blocks to catch, lungs burning, shoes still damp from slush and dirty dishwater. And now he was standing in the aisle, seat empty behind him, while a woman in wrinkled blue scrubs sank down like her bones had turned to sand. She didn't even thank him at first. She couldn't. Her head dipped, her eyelids fluttered, and her hand, still smelling faintly of sanitizer, clutched the strap above her like it was the last thing keeping her upright. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you are watching this from, because this is one of those nights that could happen anywhere. Evan swallowed and braced himself as the bus lurched forward. He tried to tell himself it was fine. He tried to tell himself he'd figure something out. But the truth was sitting heavy in his jacket pocket, a crumpled envelope with the day's pay inside. Cash. Not much, but enough. Enough for his sister's inhaler refill. Enough to keep their heat on for another week. Enough to stop his mom from staring at the kitchen table like she was watching their life drain away one unpaid bill at a time. And that envelope was the reason he needed this bus. Not the next one. Not a ride share. Not a friend's car. He didn't have any of that. Just this. The bus rattled down the avenue, windows fogged, fluorescent lights making every face look tired and sick. The seats were filled with night workers and people who didn't want to be seen in daylight. A kid with a hoodie too big for him leaned against the glass. A man in construction boots slept with his mouth open. A woman with grocery bags held them tight like somebody might steal the last pieces of her week. Evan kept his eyes on the nurse. She looked older than him by a lot, late 20s, early 30s maybe. But exhaustion made time weird. Her hair had slipped out of a tight bun, strands sticking to her forehead. There was a crease across her cheek like she'd rested her face on a desk for 2 minutes and gotten yanked back up by an alarm. The bus hit a pothole and she flinched so hard her badge swung. Evan caught the name without meaning to. Nora. Under it, RN. She pressed 2 fingers to her temple like she was trying to hold her brain inside her skull. "You okay?" Evan asked quietly, like the sound might break her. Nora's eyes opened. For a second, she stared at him like she didn't know where she was. Then she tried to sit straighter, tried to smile. It came out thin and brittle. "Yeah," she said. Her voice was raw. "Just long shift." Evan nodded. He didn't say what he was thinking. "You look like you've been awake for 2 days." He knew that look. His mom had worn it when his dad left and she took double shifts cleaning offices downtown. Same hollow stare. Same way the body moved on autopilot, like the person inside had stepped out to breathe and never came back. The bus was warm, too warm, and Evan's skin still prickled with cold sweat from running. He held the overhead rail. His legs ached. His stomach was empty. The smell of wet coats and cheap cologne and old seats soaked into his nose. He told himself to relax. He told himself there would be another bus, but he knew the schedule. Last bus meant last bus. They passed the strip mall with the broken sign, the pawn shop, the laundromat still lit at midnight. The road bent toward the industrial side of town, where streetlights spaced out like they were rationed. Evan's stop was near the depot, at the edge of the warehouses. From there it was 10 minutes on foot to the apartment complex, 10 minutes in daylight. At 12:47 a.m., it was something else. The bus driver, an older guy with a gray beard and eyes that never softened, kept glancing up at the mirror. Not just driving, watching. Evan noticed because Evan had learned to notice. When you grow up counting dollars and timing your life around cheap transit, you learn who's paying attention. At the next stop, the doors opened and cold air slapped the aisle. 2 men got on, not workers, not commuters. Their jackets were too clean, their shoes too nice. They moved like they owned the space. They didn't sit. They stood near the front, faces angled down, but their eyes flicked across the bus like a scan. One of them looked straight at Evan. It wasn't a long look. It wasn't dramatic. It was quick and flat, like checking something off a list. Evan's throat tightened. He looked away, forced himself to stare at a smear on the floor, forced his mind back to something normal. His sister's laugh when she watched cartoons too loud, the way she pretended her inhaler was a microphone. The bus rolled on. Nora shifted in her seat, hugging her elbows. Her hands were red and dry, cracked from constant washing. There was a faint stain on one sleeve of her scrubs. Not dirt, darker. Evan tried not to stare. "You shouldn't have done that," Nora said suddenly. Evan blinked. "What?" "Gave up your seat." Her gaze stayed forward, unfocused. "You look like you've been standing all day." "So do you." That earned him a quiet, surprised laugh. It barely had air in it. "Yeah," she said. "Standing's kind of the job." Evan hesitated, then said it anyway. "My mom used to clean offices, night shift. People would walk past her like she was part of the building." Nora's eyes shifted to him now, fully. Something softened, just a fraction. "People don't see tired," she said. "They see inconvenience." The words landed too perfectly, like she'd said them 100 times. Evan nodded. His fingers tightened around the rail. He glanced toward the front again. The two men were still standing. One of them had turned slightly, like he was listening without looking like he was listening. Evan's stomach tightened again. He hated this, hated being paranoid. But paranoia was cheaper than being wrong. The bus slowed at a red light. Outside, the streets were nearly empty. A couple of cars passed, headlights sliding across wet pavement, neon signs reflected in puddles like broken paint. The driver's radio crackled. Evan couldn't make out the words. Nora lifted her chin like she caught something too. Her shoulders tensed. "You hear that?" Evan asked. Nora didn't answer right away. Her eyes tracked to the driver, to the mirror, back to the window. "I'm probably just tired," she said finally, but she didn't sound convinced. The light turned green. The bus moved. 2 stops later, a woman with a stroller tried to board. The driver shook his head. "Bus is full," he barked, even though Evan could see empty seats in the back. People had just piled bags onto them. The woman pleaded. The baby started crying. The driver shut the doors anyway. Evan looked down at the floor, jaw clenched. Nora stared straight ahead, lips pressed tight like she was forcing herself not to react. Like reacting would cost her more energy than she had left. The bus turned onto a darker road. The city thinned. Buildings became blank walls, chain-link fences, loading docks. The kind of places that looked abandoned even when people worked there. Evan knew this stretch. He hated it. Every time he rode through here at night, he kept his keys between his fingers like that would make him a different kind of victim. Nora shifted again, adjusting her bag on her lap. It wasn't a purse. It was a battered canvas tote, heavy enough to pull on her shoulder. The top was zipped, but not all the way. Evan saw a corner of something inside, paper, maybe a folder. She followed his glance and pulled the zipper closed without a word. Evan flushed and looked away. The bus hit another pothole. Nora winced and whispered something under her breath. "What was that?" Evan asked. Nora shook her head. "Nothing," but her voice was tight. They rode in silence for a minute. Then the driver called out, "Next stop, Depot." Evan's heart sank. That was him. He stepped back, shifting his weight, preparing to squeeze past people. His legs already felt heavier, like they knew what was coming. Nora looked at him. "That's you?" "Yeah," Evan said, trying to sound casual. "It's fine. I'll be home in like 10 minutes. Nora's eyes flicked to the window. Outside, it was nothing but warehouse fronts and dead lots, a stretch of sidewalk that looked like it hadn't seen a human in months. Her jaw tightened. "That's not 10 minutes, she said quietly. Evan tried to smile. "It is if you walk fast." Nora's lips parted like she wanted to argue, but the bus was already slowing. The doors opened with a sigh. Cold air poured in, sharp and wet, the smell of metal and oil and damp concrete. Evan stepped down. For a second, he stood on the curb, waiting, just instinct, like he expected the bus to wait for him to make a better decision. It didn't. The driver didn't even glance at him. The doors shut. The engine growled and the bus rolled forward. Evan watched the red taillights pull away into the dark like eyes closing. He turned back toward the road. The depot stop was under a single street lamp that flickered like it was fighting for its life. The light hummed, buzzing in his ears. Across the street, the warehouse fences threw long shadows that looked like bars. Evan shoved his hands into his pockets, fingers brushing the envelope. He squeezed it like the pressure could keep it real. He started walking, his shoes scuffed on gravel. The sidewalk was cracked, uneven, water pooled in the low spots. Somewhere far off, a train horn moaned. He told himself, head down, just get home. Then he heard it, not footsteps, an engine, slow, too slow to be passing. Evan kept walking, pretending he didn't notice. His shoulders went rigid, his spine prickled. The engine sound stayed with him. He didn't look back. He counted his breaths instead. 1, 2, 3. The street lamp behind him flickered harder, and for a moment his shadow jumped like something was grabbing at it. Ahead, the road curved between two warehouses. The sidewalk narrowed, the light thinned, the dark got thicker. Evan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. 2%. He swore under his breath. The screen lit his face, pale in the night. A text from his mom. "You home?" Evan stared at it. His thumb hovered. Behind him, the engine sound stopped. Evan's stomach dropped so hard it felt like he'd missed a step. He locked the phone without replying and slipped it back into his pocket. He forced himself not to turn around, not yet. He kept walking, but his pace changed. Faster, quieter. The air smelled like rain and exhaust. Somewhere to his left, in the darkness beyond the fence, a shape moved. Not a cat. Too big. Evan's fingers closed around the envelope again, then around his keys. A faint click echoed behind him, like a car door shutting softly. Evan finally looked back. A sedan sat under the dying street lamp at the stop, half in shadow. Its headlights were off, but he could feel it there, like a stare. And on the sidewalk near the pole, just at the edge of the light, someone stood perfectly still. Not waving, not calling out, just watching him walk away. Evan didn't run right away. Running makes you a target. Running makes you obvious. Running makes you look guilty, even when you're just a kid trying to get home with $82 in an envelope. So he walked, fast but not fast enough to look scared. He kept his shoulders loose like he was just cold, like the dark warehouses didn't bother him, like he hadn't just seen a man standing perfectly still under a street lamp watching him walk away. Behind him, the sedan stayed quiet. No headlights, no horn. No engine rev, just presence. Evan's mind tried to talk him out of it. Maybe it's someone waiting for a ride. Maybe it's a security guard. Maybe it's nothing. But he'd lived long enough in the wrong neighborhoods to know the difference between nothing and waiting. He reached the curve between the two warehouses. The sidewalk narrowed and the chain-link fence rose higher, topped with barbed wire that caught what little light there was. Beyond the fence, stacked pallets, shadowy shapes, a dumpster that smelled like sour rot. Evan's phone felt like a brick in his pocket. 2%. Might as well be 0. He pictured his mom staring at their kitchen table, tapping her nails against a chipped mug, checking the clock every 10 minutes. He pictured his little sister, Mia, asleep on the couch with the inhaler on the cushion like a teddy bear. He couldn't be late. He couldn't come home without the envelope. He couldn't come home at all if he let whatever this was turn into something else. He kept walking. The air changed as he moved deeper into the industrial stretch. Less city, more metal. Less light, more empty. The kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful. The kind that felt like it was holding its breath. He heard the sedan again. Not the engine starting, just a soft roll, tires on wet asphalt, creeping forward. Evan's stomach tightened so hard it almost hurt. He reached the next intersection, a dead four-way with a blinking red light that didn't blink so much as struggle. On the corner sat a gas station, lights on but dim, the convenience store behind thick glass. A place that should have been open. A place that should have had people. He angled toward it anyway, because even a locked door was better than nothing. Cameras, at least. Light. He crossed the street. The moment he stepped into the station's glow, he felt exposed, like the light made him easier to read, like anyone watching from the shadows could see the fear he'd been trying to hide. He walked up to the glass door and grabbed the handle. It didn't budge. He tried again. Harder. A sign hung from the inside. Closed, due to staffing. Evan stared at it for a second, like the words might change if he looked long enough. Inside, the shelves were half-stocked. The register lights were off. The coffee machine was dead. It looked abandoned, but not old abandoned, like someone had just decided, tonight of all nights, to leave early and not come back. Evan pressed his forehead lightly against the cool glass, thinking. He could call someone. No. Phone dying. He could bang on the door. No. Nobody inside. He could wait under the station lights until a car passed, but cars didn't pass here at this hour unless they had a reason. And the sedan already had a reason. Evan's reflection in the glass looked thin and tired and too young to be out here alone. He forced himself to straighten, to act like he belonged. He turned slowly. The sedan was there now, across the street, parked at an angle like it had always been there. Still no headlights. Evan couldn't see the driver. He couldn't see anyone inside, but he could feel the car's attention like a hand at the back of his neck. The first instinct, pure panic, rose in him like bile. Run. But where? Back toward the bus stop, where that man had stood under the street lamp, into the warehouses, down the long road with no light? He looked left. A narrow side street ran behind the gas station, lined with a few small businesses that closed at 5. A tire shop, a storage place, a boarded-up diner sign. He looked right. The main road continued toward his apartment complex, long, straight, dark, fences on both sides, nowhere to duck. Evan's brain moved fast, like it always did when things were about to go wrong. If they wanted him, they'd come to him. If he stayed here, under the light, maybe they'd hesitate. He stood still, hands in his pockets, face blank, pretending he was just waiting for someone. The sedan's driver door opened. Soft, controlled. A man stepped out. Not the still watcher from the lamp, different shape, taller, broad shoulders, a jacket too clean for this place. He shut the door gently, like he didn't want to make noise. Then, the passenger door opened. A second man got out, and even from across the street, Evan recognized the posture, one of the two men who got on the bus. Evan's skin went cold. They didn't rush. They didn't shout. They crossed the street like they were going for a late-night snack, like they weren't out here because they'd been tracking a kid since the depot stop. Evan didn't move. He watched them approach, forcing himself to keep his face steady. His heart hammered so hard he thought it might give him away. The man from the bus smiled first. It wasn't friendly. It was practiced. "Hey," he called, voice smooth. "You dropped something back there." Evan didn't answer. The other man lifted his hands a little, palms out. "Relax, we're not trying to start anything." Evan's fingers tightened around his keys in his pocket. The busman took another step, stopping just outside arm's reach, like he understood space, like he'd done this before. "You're Evan, right?" he asked. Evan's throat went dry. He hadn't told anyone his name tonight. Not the driver, not the nurse, not anybody. The man's smile didn't change. "See? That's not a big deal. We just want to talk." Evan forced his voice to come out. "I don't know you." "No," the man said, nodding like Evan had made a good point. "You don't. And that's fair. But we know you." The other man leaned slightly, scanning the street behind Evan, the closed store, the empty sidewalks, like he was checking for witnesses. "There's something you've got," the busman said, still calm. "Something that doesn't belong to you." Evan's mind flashed to the envelope. Cash. His pay. "They think I stole it," Evan said quickly, trying to steer it toward something normal, something small. "I didn't. It's my money. I worked for it." The busman's eyes flickered, not to Evan's face, but to Evan's jacket pocket. Evan felt it. The gaze. That's when he knew. This wasn't about his paycheck. The busman's voice stayed smooth, but it got quieter, sharper. Not that. Evan's pulse spiked. He thought about Nora's tote, the folder corner he'd seen, the way she zipped it closed fast, the way she looked at the driver, the way she tensed when the radio crackled. He tried to swallow, but his mouth was too dry. "I don't have anything," Evan said. The busman smiled again. "Come on, you don't have to lie. It just makes this messy." Evan forced himself to stand still, even as his body screamed to move. "You're blocking me," he said. "Yeah," the other man replied, like he was agreeing about the weather. "That's kind of the point." The busman took one more step, close enough now that Evan could smell him, mint gum and something metallic like coins or a weapon. "You're a good kid," the busman said softly. "You gave up your seat. That was noble." Evan's stomach turned. They'd been watching him on the bus the whole time. "And that nurse," the man continued, voice almost conversational. "She's tired, huh? Poor thing. Long night. Hospitals are wild." Evan couldn't help it. His eyes narrowed. "Leave her out of this." The busman's smile faded for the first time. Just a fraction. "See," he said. "That's why we like you. You care. Makes you predictable." Evan's grip on the keys tightened until his knuckles hurt. He made a decision, not a plan. Just a decision. If he stayed, he was done. If he moved, at least he had a chance. He shifted his weight like he was backing up, like he was thinking about going around them. The other man adjusted instantly, mirroring him, cutting off the angle. Evan's lungs pulled in air. He threw his shoulder sideways and lunged for the gap between them. The busman reacted fast, too fast, snatching at Evan's jacket. The fabric yanked tight across Evan's chest. Evan's keys came out of his pocket like claws. He swung his hand back hard, not aiming to stab, just to make space. The keys scraped something, jacket, skin, he didn't know. But the man cursed, sharp and real, and that half-second was enough. Evan twisted out of the grip and sprinted. He ran down the side street behind the gas station, shoes slapping wet pavement, breath tearing out of him in ragged bursts. He didn't look back. He didn't slow. He didn't think about how stupid it was to run into darker streets. He just ran. Behind him, he heard footsteps, 2 sets, pounding, closing the distance. "Stop!" someone yelled. Evan's body ignored it. He cut between the tire shop and the storage building into a narrow passage that smelled like rubber and rain. His shoulders slammed a wall. Pain flared, but he kept going. He burst out into a small lot, dark except for a security light that blinked like it was dying. A chain-link gate at the far end was locked. Dead end. Evan's chest seized. He skidded to a stop and looked around, wild-eyed. To his right, a dumpster. To his left, stacked wooden pallets. Ahead, locked gate and fence. Behind, footsteps getting louder. Evan's mind raced. He climbed the pallets, hands slick on wet wood, boots slipping. He hauled himself up, heart in his throat, and grabbed the top of the fence. Barbed wire. He froze for a split second, staring at it. No time. He pulled his hoodie sleeve over his hand, gritted his teeth, and pushed the wire down just enough to make a gap. The metal bit through fabric. Pain shot up his arm. He didn't stop. He swung one leg over, then the other, dropping hard on the other side. He landed wrong, ankle screaming, but he kept moving, limping into the dark alley beyond. He forced his leg to work, forced his lungs to keep pulling air. Behind him, a heavy thud hit the fence, one of them climbing. Evan pushed forward, turning another corner, and almost slammed straight into a figure emerging from the darkness. He jerked back, instinct raising his keys again. Then he saw blue fabric. Scrubs. Nora stood there, breathless, hair half fallen, eyes wide with fear and anger like she'd been running too. "Evan!" she hissed, grabbing his sleeve. "What did you do?" Evan stared at her like she was a ghost. "You got off the bus," he rasped. "Why are you here?" Nora's grip tightened, and her voice dropped to a whisper that didn't feel like a whisper at all. "Because they're not after you," she said. "They're after what you walked away with." A shadow dropped onto the fence behind them. Metal rattled. A shoe hit pavement. Nora's eyes snapped past Evan's shoulder. "Run," she breathed, and the first headlight beam cut into the alley like a blade. Evan's ankle screamed with every step, but Nora didn't slow for it. She yanked him forward like she'd decided pain was a luxury neither of them could afford. They ran deeper into the alley, past a row of dented dumpsters and a loading dock with a busted keypad. The headlight beam behind them swept along the brick like a searchlight, carving their shadows tall and ugly. Evan glanced back just long enough to see movement. 2 men, same jackets, same calm pace that didn't match the situation. One held something low at his side. Not a gun, Evan couldn't tell, but the way he carried it made Evan's stomach drop anyway. Nora cursed under her breath and pulled Evan toward a service door set into the wall. "Help me," she hissed. "What? Push!" Evan slammed his shoulder into the door. It didn't budge. Nora dug in her tote with shaking hands, not looking for a wallet, not looking for keys. Her fingers closed around a lanyard and a hard plastic card, a hospital badge. She swiped it across the reader on the door like this was a back entrance she'd used before. The keypad beeped once. Red. "Come on," she whispered, and swiped again, slower. Beep. Green. The lock clicked. Nora shoved the door open and practically threw Evan inside. They stumbled into darkness that smelled like cold cement and old cardboard. Evan's shoes skidded on a floor slick with oil. Nora slammed the door and turned the bolt with both hands, breathing hard. For 2 seconds, there was nothing but the sound of their lungs tearing at air. Then a fist hit the door. Not a wild punch, controlled, heavy, like the person on the other side knew exactly how much force it took to make you feel it without breaking bone. Bang! Evan flinched. Nora pressed her back to the door as if her body could reinforce it. Her eyes were wide, but her voice came out sharp. "Don't move," she whispered. Evan didn't answer. He stood there, chest heaving, keys still clenched in his fist like he was holding on to the only weapon he had. Another bang. Then a voice through the metal, smooth, familiar. "Evan," the man called. "Open up, we can do this the easy way." Evan's skin went cold. He looked at Nora. "How does he know my name?" Nora's jaw tightened. "Because this isn't random." Bang. The door vibrated. Dust fell from the frame. "Miss Nora," the voice continued like he was speaking to someone he respected. "We don't want you mixed up in this." Evan watched Nora's face change at the sound of her name. It wasn't surprise, it was something uglier, recognition. "You know him?" Evan whispered. Nora didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the door like she could see through it. "I know the type," she said. The voice on the other side sighed, almost patient. "Just hand over what you have and this can end right now." Evan's mind flashed to her tote, the heavy canvas, the zipper she'd closed fast, the corner of paper he'd seen. "What do you have?" Evan asked, voice barely there. Nora's hands shook as she hugged her tote closer to her chest. "Something I wasn't supposed to take." Another bang, harder. The bolt rattled. Evan jumped, then forced himself still. Nora's eyes snapped to him. "Listen to me. If they get it back, someone dies. If they don't, someone might die anyway. That's what this is." Evan swallowed. "Who?" Nora's throat bobbed. "A patient." Evan stared at her. He wanted to ask 100 questions, but the door took another hit and the metal groaned. Nora scanned the room, finally letting her eyes adjust. It was some kind of storage space, boxes stacked high, a pallet jack, a narrow hallway leading deeper in. Dim emergency lights blinked red along the ceiling like a heartbeat. "Come on," she said, grabbing Evan's sleeve again. They moved away from the door, deeper into the building, trying not to make noise. Evan limped, teeth clenched. The pain in his ankle was sharp enough to make him nauseous, but he forced himself to keep up. The hallway opened into a wider area with loading bays, all shut, metal doors sealed tight. A small office sat to the side with a window covered in grime. Nora rushed to the office door and tried the handle, locked. She tried again, harder, then looked around, desperate. Evan's eyes landed on a row of shelves. On top, a red toolbox, dusty. He grabbed it, yanked it down, and snapped it open. A crowbar. Nora's eyes flicked to it. "Good." Evan blinked. "Good?" Nora took it from him like she'd done this before and jammed it into the office door frame. She leaned into it with her whole weight. The wood creaked. Evan heard the door behind them, back where they came in, take another hit. Someone was inside now, or close. The office door popped open. Nora shoved it wider and pulled Evan inside. The office was cramped. Old desk, flickering monitor, a bulletin board with outdated safety posters. A phone sat dead on its cradle. Evan's hope rose and died in the same breath. Nora slammed the door and shoved the desk against it. Evan scanned the room for anything useful. A window? No, it looked out into the same warehouse area. No escape. Nora yanked open drawers, searching fast. She found a small walkie, lifted it, pressed the button. Static. She pressed again. "Hello? Anyone?" Static, then a faint click. Evan held his breath. A voice came through, low and distorted. "Who is this?" Nora's shoulders sagged with relief for half a second. "This is Nora. I need help." "Two men." The radio cut off. Evan's heart sank. "What happened?" Nora stared at it. Either there's no signal, or someone doesn't want there to be. The desk behind them shifted, someone pushing from the other side of the office door. Evan's throat tightened. "They're in." Nora's eyes snapped to him, and for the first time, Evan saw something beyond exhaustion. Fear, yes, but also resolve, like she'd already decided how far she was willing to go. She shoved her tote onto the desk, yanked it open, and pulled out a manila folder. Evan leaned closer before he could stop himself. The folder wasn't hospital paperwork, not normal paperwork. He saw a stamped header, something official. He saw typed lines with blocks of blacked-out text. He saw a barcode sticker that didn't look like it belonged on any patient chart. And taped to the inside, folded and shoved into the pocket, a small USB drive. Evan's eyes widened. "That's evidence," Nora whispered, "or at least, it's something that can't exist." The door shook again. A crack splintered along the frame. Evan's mind raced. "Why do they think I have it?" Nora looked at him like that question didn't matter right now. "Because you were with me, because you saw me, because you gave up your seat and stood right next to me while those men watched." Evan's mouth went dry. "They were watching you." Nora's gaze hardened. "They were watching the bag." Another shove, harder. The desk scraped slightly. Evan's eyes darted around the office. Posters, a stapler, a coffee mug, nothing. His phone buzzed again in his pocket like it was mocking him. He pulled it out. 1%. He opened it fast, thumb shaking. No service. Of course. He shoved it back and looked at Nora. "What do we do?" Nora stared at the folder like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Then she made a choice. She pushed the folder toward Evan. Evan recoiled. "No, take it," she snapped, quiet but fierce. "If they get me, they'll get it. If you have it, you can run." Evan's chest tightened. "Run where? My phone's dead. I can't—" "Evan," Nora grabbed his wrist, eyes locked on his. "Listen, you're young, you're fast, you've already been running. I'm in scrubs. I'm easy to identify. You have a chance." Evan shook his head, jaw clenched. "I'm not leaving you." Nora's expression flickered, something like gratitude, then pain. "You gave up your seat. You don't get to give up your brain, too." The desk jumped as the door took a hit that sounded like a shoulder slam. The frame cracked wider. Evan's breath caught. Nora thrust the folder into Evan's hands. The paper felt colder than it should have, like it had been waiting for him. "Put it under your jacket," she said. "Hide the USB." Evan's hands moved on instinct. He slid the USB into his jeans pocket, then stuffed the folder inside his hoodie, pressing it flat against his stomach. The desk shifted again. The door opened a fraction, just enough for fingers to hook around the edge. Nora grabbed the crowbar and jammed it down between desk and door, bracing it. Her arms trembled. Evan stared at her. "Nora, go!" she hissed without looking back. "There's a back stairwell. That sign—" She nodded at a faded arrow on the wall. "It leads to the service corridor. Get out and get to light. Anywhere with people. You hear me?" Evan didn't move. Nora's voice sharpened. "Evan!" Evan's throat tightened. He forced his legs to move, limping toward the hallway beyond the office window. He reached the office window and pressed his hands to it, looking out. The warehouse area was darker than the alley, lit only by emergency strips. He could see the entry door they'd come through at the far end, still shut, but the bolt looked bent now. He could see shadows moving near it. He turned back to Nora. She was still braced against the door, crowbar locked, face strained, sweat shining at her temples. Her exhaustion was gone. Adrenaline had replaced it with something raw and dangerous. Evan limped to the office door on the opposite side, leading into the service corridor. He grabbed the handle, locked too. He yanked it again. "It's locked!" Nora didn't look. "There's a keypad on the wall." Evan's eyes found it, punched in random numbers, then looked at Nora helplessly. Nora gritted her teeth, still holding the crowbar in place with one hand, and reached into her pocket with the other. She tossed him the hospital badge again. "Swipe it," she said. Evan caught it and swiped. Beep. Red. His heart stopped. He swiped again, slower, pressing it flat. Beep. Green. The lock clicked. Evan opened the door, and cold air spilled in, like a breath from outside. He stepped into the corridor, and froze, because the corridor wasn't empty. At the far end, a figure stood in the dim light, tall, motionless, blocking the exit. A man in a dark jacket, hands down by his sides, head angled slightly as if listening. Not one of the two from the bus, different, older. The kind of stillness that said he didn't need to hurry because time was working for him. Evan's stomach dropped. The man took one step forward, just enough for the emergency light to catch his face. He smiled. "Evening," he said softly. "You've had a long walk." Evan backed up into the office, slamming the corridor door shut and turning the lock. Nora's eyes snapped toward him. "What? They're already inside?" Evan whispered. Nora's face drained. The office door behind her slammed again, harder than before. The desk scraped. The crowbar groaned. Nora's breathing went sharp. "We're boxed," she muttered. Evan's mind raced. He looked around the office, desperate, and his eyes landed on the ceiling vent above the desk. Large enough? Maybe. The grate screws were old. He grabbed the stapler and started ripping at the screws with shaking hands, metal scraping metal. Behind him, Nora's arms trembled as the door finally began to give. Wood splintered. A hand shoved through the crack. Evan got one screw loose, another. The vent rattled. Nora's voice cut through the panic, low and urgent. "Evan, if I tell you to run, you run. No arguing." Evan's throat tightened. "No." Nora's eyes flashed. "Evan." The office door exploded inward. The desk lurched. The crowbar snapped free. A man stumbled into the room. Busman, eyes hard now, smile gone. His hand shot out and grabbed Nora's wrist. Nora reacted instantly, swinging the crowbar up like a bat. The man jerked back, crowbar clipping his shoulder. He cursed, pain flashing across his face. The second man pushed in behind him, faster, reaching for the tote on the desk. Nora lunged, shoving the tote away with her hip. Evan's hands shook as he ripped the vent grate down. It clanged to the floor. "Up!" Nora shouted. Evan didn't think. He climbed onto the desk, ignoring the chaos below, ignoring his ankle, ignoring the way the room seemed to tilt. Nora slammed the crowbar into the second man's forearm. He yelped and recoiled. The busman grabbed Nora again, harder this time, pulling her toward him. Nora's head snapped back, and for a second, Evan saw fear, real fear, flash in her eyes. Then Nora did something Evan didn't expect. She drove her knee up hard, right into the man's stomach. He folded, wheezing. Nora tore free and looked up at Evan. "Go!" Evan shoved his shoulders into the vent opening and wriggled up, scraping his hoodie, the folder pressing against his stomach like a secret burning through fabric. He kicked, pulled, shoved himself into the duct. Below, Nora swung the crowbar again. Metal hit bone, a curse, a thud. Evan crawled forward on elbows, the duct cold and filthy. Every sound echoed. Every breath sounded too loud. Behind him, Nora's voice, sharp, commanding, then suddenly strained. Evan's chest tightened. He turned his head, trying to see through the duct opening. He caught a glimpse of hands grabbing Nora. He caught a glimpse of her fighting. Then the office lights flickered. Then a new sound rolled in from outside the building, low at first, like distant thunder. Engines, not one, many. The men froze for half a second, like they heard it too. The thunder grew louder fast, a deep roar that made the duct vibrate around Evan's ribs. Headlights flared through gaps in the warehouse doors, like daylight forcing its way in. And somewhere below, as the sound swallowed everything, Evan heard one of the men whisper, sharp, panicked, like the plan just died. "Harleys!" The roar wasn't just loud, it was organized. It came in waves, one after another, so tight and synchronized that the air itself seemed to stiffen. The warehouse walls trembled, dust sifted from the rafters. Evan felt it through the duct metal under his ribs like a second heartbeat. Below him, the office chaos stopped for a fraction of a second, the way predators pause when a bigger predator steps into the room. "Harleys," someone repeated, louder now, and this time it wasn't awe, it was fear. Evan crawled forward in the duct, elbows burning, trying to find a vent slit or a grate he could see through. The duct angled, then opened to a wider section above the warehouse floor. Through a seam in the metal, he caught flashes, moving light, silhouettes, the swing of shadows as doors began to open. A heavy crash echoed from the far end of the building. Not a punch, not a kick. A loading bay door being forced up. Cold night air surged in, carrying the smell of rain and exhaust and hot engines. The roar flooded the warehouse like water. Then the sound changed. Engines dropped into a lower rumble, controlled, not chaotic, like the riders had cut speed at the exact same moment. Footsteps hit concrete, many, measured. Evan's breath caught. The two men inside the office moved again, but their confidence was gone. The busman hissed something under his breath and jerked his head toward Nora like she was suddenly a problem they needed to finish fast. Nora wasn't finished. She was bent forward, one arm trapped in the busman's grip, but she'd kept the crowbar in her other hand. Her face was smeared with sweat and grime now, hair loose around her cheeks, eyes sharp like scalpels. The second man reached for her tote again. Nora swung. The crowbar cracked across his wrist with a sick sound. He stumbled back, cursing, shaking his hand like he couldn't believe pain was real. The busman yanked Nora closer, snarling now, the smooth mask gone. "Where is it?" Nora didn't answer. She twisted her wrist, trying to free it, jaw clenched so tight her cheek muscles jumped. From the warehouse floor outside the office, a new voice carried, deep, calm, and somehow louder than the engines. "Let her go." Not shouted, commanded. The busman froze mid-motion. His eyes flicked to the office window where pale light spilled through grime. Evan pressed closer to the duct seam. He could see better now. The warehouse floor had filled with figures, leather vests, heavy boots, dark helmets either carried or still on. Some had bandanas pulled up. Others didn't bother hiding their faces at all. They weren't rushing. They weren't flailing around with bravado. They were standing in a loose arc in front of the office like a wall that had decided to become human. And at the front of that wall stood a man bigger than the rest, older, gray threaded through his beard, a calm that didn't look like peace. It looked like experience. He lifted a hand slightly, and behind him the rumble dropped again. Silence pressed in around the building. Evan realized something that made his skin crawl. They hadn't stumbled in because they heard a fight. They came like they'd been called, like they'd already known where to go. The office door creaked as the busman shifted his stance, still holding Nora's wrist, trying to keep her as leverage. "You don't want to do this," he called out through the broken doorway, forcing his voice back into control. The biker leader didn't move. "You're doing it." The busman's eyes darted, counting bodies, counting exits, counting the fact that the loading bay behind the bikers was now blocked by motorcycles lined up in a staggered barrier. Not random parking. Placement. The second man in the office swallowed hard, glancing from Nora to the warehouse floor. His pupils looked too wide. His hand kept flexing like it was remembering what pain felt like. The biker leader took one step forward. Evan watched him carefully. Nothing about him screamed hero. There was no dramatic flourish, no movie speech, just a man walking into danger like he'd done it 100 times and survived because he didn't waste movement. "Miss Nora," the leader said. Nora went still. Evan felt it, her recognition, like a switch flipping. Her eyes sharpened on the man outside the office window. "Don't," she warned quietly, not to the bikers but to the men holding her. "Don't say my name like you know me." The busman's head snapped toward her. "You know them?" Nora didn't answer. The biker leader's face didn't change, but his voice softened by a fraction. "We're not here for a conversation," he said. "We're here because you shouldn't be alone out here." That line hit Evan weird, not because it was kind, because it was personal. The busman's grip on Nora tightened. "Back off. I'm walking out. With her." The biker leader didn't blink. "You're not walking out with anybody." A biker to the leader's left lifted his phone, camera pointed straight at the office. Another biker did the same, then another. Like they'd all been waiting for a signal. The busman's eyes flicked to the phones, and Evan saw calculation flicker behind his face. Evidence, witnesses. This wasn't a brawl anymore. This was a trap with cameras. The busman jerked Nora closer to him and hissed, "Where's the folder?" Nora's eyes flashed. She smiled, small, cold. "Gone," she said. The second man's head snapped up. "What?" The busman's face twitched. "Liar." Nora kept her smile. "Check my bag, check my pockets, check my soul. It's not here." Evan's stomach twisted in the duct. The folder pressed against him like it had gained weight, like it could be seen through metal. The busman's gaze whipped to the office ceiling for the first time, scanning vents, corners, shadows. He had just realized something. Evan held his breath so hard his ribs ached. The biker leader stepped closer again. "Last chance," he said. The busman's jaw tightened. His eyes darted toward the corridor door, the one Evan had slammed, the exit they'd tried to control. But Evan knew. Someone was in that corridor. The older, still man from earlier. And if the Harleys were already here, that meant the corridor man wasn't theirs. Or maybe he was. Evan couldn't tell anymore. The second man shifted his weight like he wanted to run, like he'd suddenly remembered he wasn't built for going up against a wall of people who weren't scared. A biker toward the back called out, voice sharp, "We got another vehicle outside. Dark sedan, engine warm." The biker leader's head turned slightly, absorbing that, then returned to the office. "So you brought friends," he said. The busman's throat bobbed. He tried to laugh. It came out wrong. "We're just trying to correct a mistake," he said. "She took something she shouldn't." Nora's laugh this time was real, but bitter. "You call it a mistake. I call it murder with paperwork." The warehouse went dead quiet. Even the engines seemed to hold their breath. The biker leader's eyes narrowed. "You hear that?" he asked the busman. "That's a confession." The busman's face hardened. "Let me go and nobody gets hurt." The biker leader's voice turned flat. "You're already hurting people." The busman's hand moved suddenly, down toward his jacket, toward something at his waist. Nora saw it. She moved at the same time, driving the crowbar up into his forearm with all she had left. He yelled, raw, his hand jerking away. The second man lunged, trying to grab Nora's tote, desperate now. And the biker leader moved. He didn't run. He simply crossed the distance like it was nothing. In 2 steps, he was at the office doorway. In 3, his hand clamped onto the second man's collar and slammed him into the wall with a single brutal motion that made the office window rattle. "No," the biker leader said quietly in the man's face. "You don't touch her." The second man's eyes went wide, and Evan saw the moment his courage broke. The busman staggered back, clutching his arm, rage and panic mixing. His eyes shot up again, to the ceiling vent. Evan's blood ran cold. The busman pointed. "He's up there," he spat. "The kid, he's got it." Nora's head snapped up. Her eyes locked on the vent. Evan's stomach dropped through the floor. The biker leader followed their gaze, looking up into the duck shadows. For a split second, Evan expected anger, suspicion, anything. Instead, the biker leader's expression shifted, just enough to show surprise, like he hadn't expected a kid, like he hadn't expected Evan, and then, like he recognized him. "Evan," the biker leader called, voice steady. Evan didn't answer. His throat refused to work. The busman seized the moment. He bolted for the corridor door. 2 bikers moved to intercept, but the corridor door flew open first. The older still man stepped in, same calm, same posture, blocking the busman's path like a gate. He raised one hand, palm out. The busman stopped hard, eyes widening. "You're late," the busman snapped, voice shaking now. The older man smiled slightly. "No," he said. "I'm exactly on time." Evan's mind spun. Who was that? Before anyone could move, the older man reached into his jacket and pulled out something that flashed under the emergency lights. A badge, not hospital, not security, federal looking. He held it up just long enough for the busman to see, then tucked it away like he didn't care who believed him. "Hands where I can see them," the older man said. The busman's face drained. Because whatever game he thought he was playing, street intimidation, quiet extraction, it had just become something else. The biker leader didn't take his eyes off the office. He looked up again at the vent. "Kid," he said, voice lower now, "if you're up there, don't be scared. We're not here to hurt you." Evan's chest squeezed. He crawled forward in the duct, metal groaning softly, and found a vent opening above the office. He pushed it down just enough to peer out. Below, Nora stood with the crowbar still in hand, breathing hard, hair wild, eyes locked on him like she'd been holding her breath for him. And all around her, leather vests, calm faces, phones recording, engines cooling, Harleys, already there, waiting. Evan swallowed. He didn't know who to trust, but he knew one thing. The night had stopped being about getting home. It was about what he carried under his hoodie, and the wrong person had just said his name out loud. Evan pushed the vent cover down just a little more, and the office light spilled up into the duct, catching his face like a spotlight. His throat tightened. His hands were shaking, not from fear alone. Adrenaline, pain, the cold metal under his chest, all of it mixing into one buzzing panic. Below him, the biker leader held his gaze without blinking. "Easy," the man said again, like Evan was a wild animal and the wrong tone would make him bolt. "You're safe now." Evan didn't feel safe, not with that word, now, like it could change in a second. Nora's eyes never left Evan's. She looked wrecked, a smear of grime on her cheek, her scrubs pulled, her shoulders rising and falling too fast. But she was standing, crowbar still in hand, still between Evan and the men who'd chased him. The 2 men, busman and his partner, were being held in place now. One pinned against the wall by a biker with forearms like steel cables. The busman stood rigid, his injured arm held tight to his side, eyes flicking up at Evan like he was watching money fall from a roof. In the corridor doorway, the older still man with the badge kept his stance calm. He wasn't shouting, didn't need to. Evan's mind latched onto the badge like a lifeline. Federal looking. Real? Fake? Either way, it made the busman stop running. "Evan," Nora said, voice hoarse. "Come down, please." Evan's fingers found the edge of the duct. He tried to shift his weight, and pain stabbed up from his ankle so hard his vision blurred. He hissed. Nora's face tightened. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," Evan lied automatically. The biker leader's eyes flicked to Evan's leg, then back to his face. "You're not fine, but you're alive. That matters." Evan swallowed. "Who are you?" A few of the bikers exchanged looks, like the question was both expected and inconvenient. The leader answered anyway. "Name's Clay." He said it like it didn't matter, like names were just labels. Evan looked at Nora. "You know him." Nora's jaw clenched. "I know what he does." Clay didn't react to that. He simply lifted his chin toward the duct opening. "Kid, I'm going to ask you something, and you're going to answer honestly. You got a folder on you?" Evan's stomach twisted. The folder pressed flat under his hoodie, sticky against his sweat-damp shirt. The USB in his jeans pocket felt like it weighed a pound. Evan didn't answer. Clay's voice stayed even. "If you don't have it, we move on. If you do have it, we treat it like a live wire. We don't wave it around. We don't argue about it in front of people who want it. You understand?" Evan's eyes darted to the busman. The busman's mouth curled, trying to look calm, but his eyes were frantic. He'd lost control, and he hated it. "Don't listen to them," the busman said suddenly, voice sharp. "They're not cops. They're criminals with matching jackets." One of the bikers stepped closer to him, and the busman shut up fast. The older man in the corridor doorway spoke for the first time since flashing his badge. "I'm going to make this simple," he said. "You two are going to sit down on that floor and keep your hands where I can see them. If you don't, you'll learn real fast how many witnesses you're surrounded by." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. The busman's partner swallowed and slowly sank to the floor, palms out. The busman hesitated. Clay took one slow step toward him. "Sit," Clay said. The busman's eyes flicked to Clay's vest patch, and whatever he saw there did it. He lowered himself like a man sitting in front of a judge. Evan stared at the scene below, trying to make sense of it. Bikers with phones recording, a man with a badge, Nora in scrubs holding a crowbar like she'd been born with it, two men who'd hunted him now sitting on concrete like they were children caught stealing, and all of them focused on him. "Evan," Nora said again, softer. "You can trust me." Evan's throat tightened. "I already did." That landed like a punch. Nora's eyes blinked hard. For a moment she looked like she might crumble. Clay pointed up. "Come down, slow, we'll catch you." Evan shifted forward, pushing the vent opening wider. He crawled toward it, carefully, then lowered his body down until his arms hung into the office air. Pain flared again in his ankle as he tried to angle his foot. He gritted his teeth. Two bikers moved under him, arms ready, looking up like spotters. Evan let go. They caught him, lowering him to the floor with surprising gentleness. The moment his injured foot touched down, he sucked in a sharp breath and almost folded. Nora grabbed his elbow, steadying him. "Easy," she murmured. Evan shook her off, not angry, just overwhelmed. "I'm fine." Clay crouched slightly to meet Evan's height, not towering. "You're stubborn." Evan's eyes flicked to Clay's vest again. It had a patch across the top, club name he couldn't fully read in the dim office light, then a symbol beneath it. Evan didn't know biker stuff, but he knew one thing. These weren't random guys revving engines for fun. They were here for a reason. Clay nodded toward Evan's hoodie. "Folder." Evan's hands hovered. He didn't move. Nora's voice sharpened. "Clay, not here." Clay didn't look away from Evan. "Here is exactly where we confirm what we're dealing with." The older badgeman stepped into the office doorway, scanning the room quickly, eyes taking in angles, exits, the duct, the vent cover on the floor. He spoke without looking at anyone in particular. "We have maybe 3 minutes," he said, "before somebody calls somebody else." Evan's blood ran cold. "Who are you?" The man's eyes flicked to Evan. "Name's Mercer. That's all you need right now." Clay's jaw tightened like he didn't like Mercer talking to the kid. "Mercer's not wrong," Clay said. "Time is not our friend." Nora hugged her tote to her chest like it was a shield. If that folder comes out here, those men will see exactly what's missing. Clay's gaze finally shifted to Nora. They already know it's missing. They just need to confirm where it is. Evan's breathing went shallow. They were after her bag, not me. Clay's eyes returned to Evan. They started after her bag. Then you got involved. Then you got close. Then you ran with her. That makes you part of the problem. Evan's jaw clenched. I didn't choose this. Clay's tone didn't change. You chose it when you stood up on that bus. Evan froze. You knew about that? Clay didn't answer directly. He just tilted his head like Evan had said the quiet part out loud. Nora's voice went tight. How did you get here so fast? Clay's eyes flicked toward Mercer. Because someone made a call that wasn't supposed to be possible. Mercer's face stayed unreadable. Focus? Evan's mind spun. So what now? You just take it? Clay held up a hand, palm out. No, you hand it to Nora. Nora blinked. What? Clay kept his eyes on Evan. You trust her more than you trust me. That's logical. She's the one who put herself in front of you. She's the one bleeding for this. Nora's fingers tightened on the tote strap. Evan's hands shook as he reached under his hoodie and slid the folder out. The manila edges were bent now. A smear of grime marked one corner. Evan held it like it might explode. Nora reached for it, and Clay stopped her with a slight gesture. Not yet, he said quietly. Evan's heart hammered. Why? Clay's gaze slid to the busman. The busman's eyes locked on the folder like a starving person looking at food. Clay's voice dropped lower. Because I want him to confirm something. Nora's face tightened with alarm. Clay, don't! Clay walked closer to the busman, holding the folder at chest height, not close enough for a grab, just close enough to be seen. The busman's pupils flared. Clay watched his reaction like he was reading a heartbeat monitor. You see it? Clay asked calmly. That's what you came for? The busman's jaw worked, trying to decide whether silence was safer than honesty. His eyes darted to Mercer's badge again, then back to Clay. It's not yours, he muttered. Clay nodded like that was the point. And yet you tracked it. With what? A GPS tag? A contact inside the hospital? Or something worse? The busman's partner shifted on the floor, sweating now. Mercer's voice cut in, low and hard. Clay! Clay ignored him. He tapped the folder lightly with one finger. Kid, Clay said without turning around, reach into your pocket and pull out the USB. Evan's stomach dropped. No, Nora snapped. Clay! Clay finally looked at Evan again. Do it. Slow. Evan's hand went to his jeans pocket. His fingers closed around the USB and pulled it out. A tiny piece of plastic. Nothing. Everything. The moment it appeared, the busman's face changed. Not relief. Panic. Like the USB was the real problem. Clay's eyes narrowed. That was the confirmation he wanted. Nora's voice went deadly quiet. What's on that? Clay didn't answer Nora. He looked at Mercer. That's the piece they can't let leave the building. Mercer's expression tightened. We move. Now. Clay nodded once, then turned to the bikers outside the office. 2 on those men, he ordered, calm. Phones stay up. Nobody touches them unless they move. Then he looked at Evan. You're coming with us? Evan's chest tightened. I'm not. Nora grabbed Evan's arm, urgent. Evan, if you go home, they'll follow you. They'll go to your mom, to Mia. Evan's face drained. Don't say her name. Nora didn't blink. Then listen. Clay's voice stayed steady, but the edges sharpened. Your apartment isn't safe anymore. Evan's mind flashed to the text on his phone. You home, his mom waiting, his sister sleeping. His stomach turned. Mercer, Clay said. You got a unit? Mercer's mouth tightened. Not fast enough. Clay's eyes moved back to Evan. Then you come with us until we make it safe. Evan's hands shook around the USB. I don't even know you. Clay's gaze didn't flinch. You don't need to know me. You need to survive the next hour. A distant sound rose outside. Another engine, but not a Harley. Higher pitch. A car accelerating too fast. One of the bikers near the loading bay called out, voice sharp. Incoming! Headlights flashed through the loading bay gap, sweeping across the warehouse like a blade. Mercer's head snapped up. They called backup. Clay's eyes went cold. Yeah, he said. And they're early. Nora grabbed Evan's hoodie, pulling him toward the office exit. Move! Evan limped, adrenaline forcing his ankle to cooperate, folder pressed against his chest, USB clenched in his fist. As they burst out of the office into the warehouse, Evan saw it. Harleys lined up like a barricade, riders mounted and ready, headlights aimed outward. And beyond the loading bay, in the darkness, more headlights appeared, too many, too close, flooding the entrance like a wave. Clay climbed onto his bike in one fluid motion and looked straight at Evan. "Get on," he ordered. Evan hesitated for half a second. Then a gunshot cracked outside, loud enough to make the warehouse ring, and Evan's world snapped into motion. The gunshot didn't sound like the movies. It sounded like metal being ripped apart. For a split second, everything froze. Nora's breath caught, Evan's ankle stopped screaming, even the bikers' bodies locked as their minds did the same calculation. Where did it come from? What did it hit? Who's next? Then, Clay's voice cut through the warehouse, flat and absolute. "Down!" Evan dropped instinctively, folding behind the nearest bike like it was cover. His shoulder hit cold concrete. The folder thumped against his ribs. The USB bit into his palm. Nora crouched beside him, one hand on his hoodie like she was anchoring him to the ground. Outside the loading bay, headlights flared again and swept in, harsher now. Evan heard tires squeal, doors slam, voices shouting over engines. Not Harley voices, different, urgent, aggressive. One of the bikers at the front revved once, short, controlled, and rolled his bike sideways to block a wider gap. Another biker stepped forward with his phone held high, camera pointed straight out of the bay like a weapon you couldn't dodge. "Cameras up," someone barked. "Faces, plates!" Mercer moved into Evan's line of sight, stepping into the warehouse opening just enough to see outside. His posture relaxed in a way that didn't match the danger. He held his hands visible, palms out, and called to the darkness. "Everybody calm down," he said, voice carrying. "We're recording." A second gunshot cracked, closer. Concrete sparked near the bay entrance. Nora flinched, but she didn't scream. She just tightened her grip on Evan and whispered, "Don't look." Evan looked anyway. Through the staggered line of bikes, he saw shapes outside, men moving with purpose, not panicked. One crouched behind a car door. Another leaned out and fired again, the muzzle flash bright enough to burn into Evan's eyes. Clay swung one leg over his bike and started it in one motion, engine rumbling low. He didn't ride out. He waited, like he was building a wall, not charging into a fight. He looked over his shoulder at Nora and Evan. "Now," he said. "On." Evan's mind screamed no. Stranger, bike, gunfire, night. But Nora shoved him. "Evan, go!" Evan scrambled upright, pain slicing his ankle, and grabbed the back of Clay's vest. Clay's hand shot back and locked onto Evan's wrist with a grip that didn't allow negotiation. "Hold tight," Clay said, and then to the bikers, "We move in a wedge, no hero stuff, keep it clean." A biker to the left rolled forward first, then another to the right. Engines rose together, a coordinated surge. The front line of Harleys began to push through the bay opening like a living barricade, metal and rubber taking the space inch by inch. Evan clung to Clay, body vibrating from the bike. The warehouse lights flashed across his vision as they rolled into the night air. Rain hit Evan's face like needles. Outside, the scene snapped into focus in fragments. A dark sedan at an angle, two other cars behind it, doors open, men shouting. One of the men raised his arm again. But before he could fire, Mercer stepped forward into the open like he didn't care about bullets. He lifted his badge high and shouted one word that changed the shape of the moment. "Federal!" It wasn't just the word. It was the way he said it, like he meant it, like he had paperwork and consequences in his pocket. The shooter hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Clay gunned the Harley forward. The wedge moved as one, Harley sliding into the street, bikes taking positions that cut off angles, forcing the cars to either hit them or stop. No one wanted to hit a line of motorcycles with cameras pointed at them and a man shouting, "Federal," into the rain. Evan's stomach lurched as they accelerated. Wind tore at his hoodie. The folder under his jacket pressed tighter against him, like it was trying to dig its way into his skin. Behind them, another gunshot cracked, but it sounded farther away fast. They cleared the industrial stretch and hit a wider road where streetlights actually worked. The city's glow returned in patches. Evan's breath came out in harsh white bursts. Clay didn't slow until they turned into a parking lot behind a closed auto shop, a place that looked dead from the street but lit from behind. A metal gate slid open, someone already waiting, and the wedge flowed in like water. The gate clanged shut behind them. Silence hit Evan so hard it made his ears ring. Clay killed the engine and swung off. Evan tried to step down and almost collapsed. His injured ankle buckled, pain white-hot. Nora was there instantly, catching him under the arm. "Sit," she ordered. Evan sat on a low concrete curb, breathing hard, heart pounding like it was trying to break out of his chest. Clay turned, scanning the lot. Several bikes were parked in a tight arc. A few riders stayed mounted, watching the gate. Others dismounted and moved with quick purpose, checking phones, talking in low voices, watching the street. Mercer rolled in last in a nondescript SUV, headlights off like he didn't want attention. He parked behind the building and got out, rain dripping off his jacket. His eyes went straight to Clay, then to Nora, then to Evan. "You okay?" Mercer asked Evan. Evan didn't answer. He looked down at his hands. The USB was still clenched in his fist. He forced his fingers open and stared at it like it was a curse. Nora crouched in front of him, voice softer now but still firm. "Let me see your ankle." Evan tried to pull back. "It's fine." Nora's eyes cut through him. "Evan." He held still. She lifted his pant leg gently and pressed around the swollen area with experienced fingers. Evan hissed through his teeth. "Sprain," she said. "Maybe worse. You shouldn't be walking." Clay stepped closer, gaze dropping to the folder bulge under Evan's hoodie. "You still got it?" Evan's jaw tightened. "Yeah?" Clay looked at Nora. "We need to secure it." Nora shook her head. "Not here." Mercer's voice came flat. "We don't have a here. We have minutes before they circle again." Clay's eyes narrowed. "You said federal. Where's your backup?" Mercer's mouth tightened. "Not close. And not everyone is clean." That sentence dropped like a weight. Evan looked up. "Not everyone is..." "What?" Mercer didn't soften. "This isn't just two guys from a bus." Nora's hands paused on Evan's ankle. She looked up at Mercer, eyes hard. "You knew." Mercer held her gaze. "I suspected." Clay's voice sharpened slightly. "You brought us into it without saying." Mercer didn't flinch. "You were already in it. They moved on Nora the moment she walked out of that hospital. They moved on the kid the moment he got off that bus." Evan's stomach tightened again. "Why me?" Nora's voice went quiet, almost broken. "Because you were kind at the wrong time." Evan stared at her. Rain tapped the metal awning overhead, steady and cold. Clay crouched a little, meeting Evan's eyes again. "What's in that envelope you had earlier?" he asked suddenly. Evan blinked. "What envelope?" "The one you squeezed like it was your heart," Clay said. "On the bus, in your pocket." Evan's throat tightened. He didn't want to say it. Saying it made it real. "My pay," he muttered. "My sister needs her inhaler. We're behind." Clay's gaze flickered with something. Recognition, maybe. Then he nodded toward the USB in Evan's hand. "That little thing is worth more than your paycheck and everyone's bikes combined, and people are willing to kill for it." Evan's fingers tightened again. "What is on it?" Nora's voice was low. "Proof," Mercer added. "Names, transfers, a chain that looks like paperwork but isn't." Clay stood, scanning the gate again. "We can't sit here. We need a secure location." Nora looked at Clay like she hated the idea. "Where?" Clay hesitated for the first time, just a fraction, then said, "Clubhouse." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Bad idea." Clay's eyes went cold. "Better than the street." Nora looked down at Evan, voice careful. "Evan, I need you to listen. If we bring you where Clay wants to take you, you might see things you don't understand. But you'll be alive." Evan's mind flashed to his mom's text. "You home," he swallowed. "My mom. She's waiting." Mercer's eyes sharpened. "Where do you live?" Evan stiffened. "Why?" "Because if they already know your name," Mercer said, "they can find your address by morning." Evan's blood drained. "No," Nora's face tightened. "Evan, they followed you off a bus. They're not guessing." Clay stepped closer, voice firm. "We can get someone to check your place, quietly." Evan's throat closed. "My sister's there." Nora grabbed Evan's hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Then we don't waste time. We make sure they don't get to her." A biker at the gate lifted a hand, signaling. Everyone's head snapped toward the street. Through the gaps in the fence, headlights appeared again, slow this time, creeping, searching, not rushing. "Hunting." Clay's voice dropped to a command. Mount up. Nora stood, gripping her tote. Evan stared at the gate, then at the USB, then at Nora's face. His voice came out thin. I can't let them go to my family. Mercer's gaze locked on him. Then you do exactly what we say. No side moves, no brave stunts. You stay close. Clay swung back onto his Harley and extended a hand to Evan. Evan hesitated for half a breath, then he grabbed it. Clay pulled him up behind the seat. Nora climbed onto another bike behind a rider who nodded to her like they already knew she'd be here. The engine started again, a low, coordinated rumble under the rain. As the gate began to slide open, Evan looked back once, toward the streetlights, toward the city, toward home. And in that moment, his phone buzzed again in his pocket. He didn't even need to pull it out to know who it was, because his chest already knew the shape of the fear. The gate slid open with a metallic scream that seemed way too loud for a quiet move, but the Harleys didn't hesitate. They rolled out in pairs, headlights off at first, then snapping on one by one as they hit the main road, like a school of predators deciding when to show their teeth. Evan clung to Clay, the wind tearing at his hoodie, rain needling his face. Every bump sent lightning through his ankle, but the pain couldn't compete with what his brain kept replaying. His mom's text, his sister's wheeze, those men saying his name like they owned it. They didn't take the straight route. Clay cut through side streets, industrial shortcuts, underpasses where the sound of engines bounced off concrete like drums. Evan realized the formation wasn't about looking intimidating. It was about preventing cars from getting close enough to box them in again. Two bikes peeled off at a light and disappeared down a different street. Another pair stayed behind at the rear, riding slow, watching. Clay didn't look back, but he spoke over the engine noise like he knew Evan was spinning out. "Breathe," he said. Evan didn't answer. "Kid," Clay pressed, voice harder. "Breathe. If you pass out on my bike, we both eat asphalt." Evan forced air into his lungs. It tasted like wet metal and exhaust. They pulled into a back lot behind an old brick building with blacked-out windows. No sign out front, no neon, no welcoming anything. Just a roll-up door and a security camera that tracked them as they approached. The door rose halfway. Warm light spilled out. They rolled in. Inside, the world changed. It wasn't chaos. It wasn't a bar fight waiting to happen. It was a space run like a workshop, and a meeting hall had merged. Bikes lined clean along one wall, tool benches, shelves of parts, a long table at the back, coffee brewing somewhere, a TV mounted high with surveillance feeds. People moved with purpose, not posturing. Clay killed the engine. Evan swung off too fast, his ankle buckling. He caught himself on the bike seat, jaw clenched so hard his teeth hurt. Nora rushed over from another bike and grabbed his arm. "Slow, sit." Evan let her guide him to a chair near the table. The folder pressed against his stomach. The USB was still in his fist like a nerve. Mercer came in last, shutting the roll-up door behind him. The sound of it sealing felt final. Clay turned to a man near the table. Broad shoulders, shaved head, grease under his nails, and nodded once. The man nodded back and moved to the security monitors. "You sweep the perimeter?" Clay asked. "2 cars circled twice," the man replied. "Lost them on the 3rd pass." Clay's eyes narrowed. For now. Nora took a breath like she'd been holding it for hours. Then she stood up straighter, forcing herself into nurse mode. "We need to talk," she said, voice shaking slightly. "Because this is bigger than a street chase." Clay leaned back against the table, arms folded. "Then talk." Nora looked at Evan first, like she needed to anchor herself to the reason she'd run back. "You saw how tired I was," she began. "That wasn't just a long shift. That was a shift where everything felt wrong." Evan swallowed. "What happened?" Nora's eyes flicked to Mercer, then back to Evan. "At the hospital, we get transfers sometimes. Patients coming in, patients going out. Most of it is routine. Paperwork, signatures, security escort." She paused. Her hands tightened around the tote strap. "Tonight wasn't routine," she said. Clay didn't interrupt. Mercer didn't either. Nora continued, voice steadying as she leaned into the facts, like it was safer than feelings. "A patient came in, unregistered at first. No regular admission process, no family listed. The chart was thin, too thin for someone in the condition they were in." Evan's stomach tightened. "What condition?" Nora's jaw tightened. "Drugged, bruised, not from an accident, from restraint. You learn to see the difference. Silence pressed in around the table. One doctor, Nora went on, kept pushing for a quick transfer out, not upstairs, not to a proper unit, out, like the building was hot and the patient was evidence. Evan's fingers tightened around the USB until his knuckles went white. And security, Nora said, voice dropping, wasn't acting like security. They weren't protecting staff. They were guarding the paperwork. Clay's gaze sharpened. Who? Nora hesitated. Chief of Hospital Security. His name is Raymond Klein. Mercer's expression didn't change, but his eyes did, like a file drawer had just clicked open. Nora looked at him. You know him? Mercer's voice was flat. I know the name, Nora swallowed. Klein was everywhere, watching who talked, watching who looked at the chart, watching me. Evan's throat tightened. Why you? Nora's gaze flicked down, then back up. Because I asked a question. That line hit like a slap. What question? Clay asked. Nora's voice went tight. Why the patient's ID was blank. Why the medication record didn't match the vitals. Why a transfer was happening at midnight with a doctor who wasn't even on that floor. She exhaled through her nose, sharp. The doctor told me to stop being dramatic. Mercer spoke quietly. And you didn't. Nora's eyes flashed. No. She reached into her tote and pulled out a folded glove, crumpled, stained. She dropped it on the table like a symbol. I was helping move the patient, she said, and a folder fell out of a security pouch. Not mine, not nursing, security. It slid across the floor. Evan's stomach rolled. That folder? Nora nodded toward Evan's hoodie. Yes. Clay's eyes narrowed. You took it. Nora's mouth tightened. I didn't take it like a thief. I picked it up like a nurse who didn't want a patient to disappear. Mercer's voice was low. And the USB. Nora hesitated. I didn't know it was in there, she said. Not at first. I didn't open it in the hospital. I didn't have time. I just shoved it into my tote when Klein turned his head. Clay's jaw flexed. That's why they moved fast. Nora's gaze went to Evan. On the bus, I knew I was being followed. I didn't know how many. I didn't know where. I just knew every time the doors opened, I felt watched. Evan's mouth went dry. Those two men, Nora nodded. They weren't commuters. They weren't random. They were checking who got off with me. Clay's voice stayed calm. And then the kid stood up. Evan bristled. I didn't do it for... I know, Clay said, cutting him off gently. That's the point. Nora's eyes softened for a second, then hardened again. When you got off at the depot stop and they followed you, I realized something. They weren't going to let me be the only problem. They were going to erase every loose end. Evan's chest tightened. So you got off, Nora nodded. I couldn't leave you. Clay looked at Mercer. She's telling the truth. Mercer's gaze stayed on the table. I know, Evan snapped. Then tell us who you are, because you flashing that badge outside saved us, and you keep acting like you're not surprised. Mercer finally looked at him fully. I'm not here to be your friend, Mercer said. I'm here because that USB connects hospital security to something bigger, and because somebody inside that hospital is selling human lives as inventory. Evan felt sick. Human lives? Nora's face tightened. I didn't want to say it out loud. Clay's voice went colder. Say it anyway, Nora swallowed. Trafficking, she whispered, or cover-ups for it. I don't know the full chain, but I know what I saw. A patient who should have been protected being rushed out like contraband. Silence. Thick. Evan's head spun. So the USB proves it? Mercer nodded once. It likely contains transfer logs, communications, maybe footage, enough to name people, enough to topple the wrong ones. Clay's gaze shifted to Evan's hand. Kid, give me the USB. Evan flinched. No, Nora stepped in, voice urgent. Evan, Evan's voice cracked. If I give it away, how do I know it doesn't disappear? How do I know you don't disappear it? That landed hard. A few bikers shifted, not angry, alert. Like they weren't used to being questioned by a kid, but they respected the guts. Clay didn't react with offense. He nodded once, like Evan had earned the right. Fair, Clay said. Then give it to Nora. Nora looked startled. Me? Clay's eyes stayed on Evan. You trust her? Let her hold it. Evan's hand trembled. He looked at Nora. Nora met his gaze, steady. I will not let this go missing, she said. I swear. Evan swallowed hard, then extended his fist slowly and opened his palm. Nora took the USB like it was a fragile organ. Mercer exhaled, almost silent. Good. Clay tapped the table once. Now we plan. Because those men outside weren't the end. The biker near the monitor spoke up. Clay! Clay turned. What? The biker pointed at the surveillance feed. Grainy footage of the street outside. A car had just rolled past the front, slow, deliberate, then another, then a third, not rushing, not firing, just passing, like sharks circling. Mercer's jaw tightened. They found the clubhouse. Clay's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped. Nora's face drained. How? Mercer's eyes slid to the folder bulge under Evan's hoodie. Because that folder isn't just paperwork, he said. It's a map to everyone involved. Clay's voice went quiet. And they're not here to negotiate. Evan's chest tightened. My mom, he whispered. My sister. Nora snapped her eyes to him. We're going to protect them. Clay looked at Mercer. You said not everyone's clean. Mercer nodded. Which means we can't call local. Clay's gaze moved to the room. Then we move first. One of the bikers at the door lifted his phone. We just got a message, he said. Unknown number. Clay's eyes narrowed. Read it. The biker swallowed, then read aloud. Bring the drive to the depot. 10 minutes, or the boy's family pays. Evan's blood turned to ice. He didn't remember standing up, but he was standing, hands shaking, vision tunneling. They have my address, he whispered. Nora grabbed his shoulders. Evan, look at me. Evan couldn't. He saw Mia. He saw his mom. Clay's voice came like steel. No one touches your family. Not tonight. Mercer's eyes hardened. Then we stop this before they make the next call. Clay turned to the bikers. Mount up, 2 teams, 1 to the boys' home, 1 to the depot. Nora's face snapped up. Depot? Clay, that's a trap. Clay didn't blink. Yeah, he said, so we set our own. Clay didn't waste time arguing with Nora's fear. He treated it like weather, real, dangerous, but not something you negotiated with. 2 teams, he repeated, voice calm enough to steady the room. No lights, no noise, phones recording if anything moves. We don't start fights. We end threats. Evan's mouth was dry. They said depot in 10 minutes. Mercer snatched the phone from the biker and stared at the message, eyes narrowing like he was reading between the pixels. Unknown number, Mercer muttered. Spoofed, but the timing is real. Nora gripped the USB so tight her knuckles went pale. If they have his address, why would they need the drive at the depot? Clay looked at her. Because they want a clean exchange point, somewhere they control routes in and out. The depot is transit, Evan said without thinking. Buses, cameras, backlots, security office. Clay's eyes flicked to him. You work there. Evan flinched. Not the depot, the dish pit, restaurant. But my stop is by the depot. Everyone knows that. Mercer's gaze snapped up. That's enough. If they've watched you before, they've watched your pattern. Evan's stomach turned. My mom? Clay cut in, sharp. Where do you live? Exact address. Evan's throat tightened. For a second, he fought the instinct to hide it, because giving strangers your address felt like handing them a weapon. Then he remembered the message. Or the boy's family pays. Evan forced the words out. Riverton Pines, Building C, 3rd floor, Apartment 3C, off Milton. Nora's eyes softened, then hardened again. We're going to them first. Clay nodded toward 2 riders by the door. Rook, Santos, you take a 3rd. You go now. 3 bikers moved without drama. Helmets on, keys already in hand, bodies already halfway out the door. Clay pointed at another pair. Duke, Ari, you're with them. 5 engines started one by one in the back bay, muffled, controlled. Then the roll-up door lifted just enough for them to slide out like shadows. Evan's heart slammed. You're sending them to my home. Clay looked him dead in the eyes. Not sending, covering. Mercer's voice was low. You don't want them arriving after someone else does. Nora swallowed. Clay, the depot team? Clay turned to the table. Depot team is me. Nora's face tightened. No. You need someone to keep Evan and the drive safe. Clay's eyes flicked to Evan. That's why Mercer stays with the kid. Mercer's jaw flexed. I'm not your errand boy. Clay didn't blink. You're not the guy who can blend into a bus depot without starting a riot. You're the guy with a badge and a quiet car. Stay with the kid. Mercer stared at Clay for a long beat, then nodded once, sharp and unhappy. Fine, Evan's voice cracked. I'm not just staying here while you walk into a trap. Clay's tone went flat. Yes, you are. Evan's fists clenched. My family is... Nora stepped in front of him, close enough that Evan could smell disinfectant still clinging to her scrubs. Evan, look at me. He did. Nora's eyes were wet but steady. If you go to the depot, you become the bait they can grab. If you stay, you become the evidence they can't touch. Evan swallowed, shaking his head. That doesn't help, Mia, if they... It helps, Nora said, voice tightening. Because your family is getting covered right now. And because if we lose the drive, this never ends. It will keep happening to other people. And eventually it comes back to you again. Clay checked his phone, then looked to the monitors. Outside, the circling cars were still passing, slow, deliberate. They're trying to pressure us into moving, Clay said. They want panic. Mercer tapped the table. So don't give it to them. We create a different story. Clay's eyes narrowed. Meaning? Mercer took the folder from Evan's hoodie carefully, like he wasn't taking it. He was handling it. He opened it just enough to confirm what he already suspected. Official headers, blacked out sections, barcodes, internal routing stamps that screamed chain of custody. He closed it again. This folder and that USB are their only leverage. They think they can force a handoff. We make them think the handoff is happening, but not the way they expect. Nora's voice went cautious. A decoy, Clay nodded once. Exactly. Mercer looked at Evan. Do you have anything that looks like a USB? Evan blinked. What? Mercer's eyes didn't soften. Anything. Old flash drive, keychain, some cheap giveaway one. Evan shook his head. No, I'm broke. One of the bikers near the tool bench spoke up. We've got junk drives in the drawer, old dead ones. Clay pointed. Get one. The biker moved fast, pulled open a drawer and tossed a handful of old drives onto the table. Most were scratched, cheap plastic, different shapes. Nora kept her hand over the real USB like it was her heartbeat. Mercer picked up one of the junk drives and weighed it in his palm. Perfect, Clay leaned in. We walk into the depot with this, Nora snapped. Clay cut her off gently. Not to hand it over, to make them show themselves. Mercer nodded. We force them to move first. We capture plate numbers, faces, names. We get them to commit on camera. Evan's voice was thin. They were shooting earlier, Clay looked at him. They shot because they thought they could. Now they're in public. Different rules. Nora's jaw clenched. Public doesn't stop bullets. Clay's eyes stayed calm. No, but witnesses change consequences. Mercer tapped the table again. And we're not going alone. Clay's gaze shifted to the bikers. 6 riders, 2 cameras rolling at all times. No touching unless touched. Evan's stomach churned. And my family? Mercer looked at him, voice controlled. We get confirmation from the home team before anyone does anything at the depot. As if the universe was listening, a phone buzzed on the table. One of the bikers picked it up, then looked at Clay. Rook, he said. They're there. Evan's chest seized. My building? The biker nodded, still reading. They're in position, watching the stairwell and both exits. No contact yet. Evan's knees went weak. Nora caught his elbow again and eased him back into the chair. Clay leaned closer. Hear me, kid. If anyone goes near your door, they stop them before they touch it. Evan's throat worked. They better. Clay's voice went quiet, almost personal. They will. Mercer slipped the junk USB into a small evidence bag, then tucked it into his jacket like he'd done this 1,000 times. He looked at Nora. Real drive stays here, with you, under lock. Nora's eyes narrowed. With me? Here? Clay nodded. You're the safest person in this room. Nora let out a humorless breath. I'm a nurse in ripped scrubs. Clay's gaze didn't waver. Exactly. Nobody expects you to be the vault. Mercer glanced at the monitors again. The circling cars were still there, but one had slowed more than the others, like it was listening. We need to move, Mercer said, before they decide to come through the door. Clay nodded toward the garage. We roll in 2 minutes. Evan's pulse hammered. I'm staying here. Clay looked at him, and for the first time his voice softened. You're staying because your job is to live. Evan swallowed hard. And if they come here? Clay's eyes cut to the door, then back. They won't. Not if they believe we're coming to the depot. Nora's fingers tightened around the real USB. You're sure? Clay didn't answer with reassurance. He answered with action. He turned to the room. Everybody ready? Engines outside began to rumble again, low and coordinated. Mercer checked his jacket pocket. Cameras. Two bikers lifted phones. Rolling. Clay looked at Nora. Stay inside, lock it. If anything feels wrong, you move Evan to the back room and you call. He stopped himself, jaw tightening, because the truth hung in the air. Call who? Not local. Not clean. Mercer finished the sentence. Call me. Direct line. He handed Nora a phone, already unlocked, already set to a contact. Nora took it with a shaky hand. Clay stepped toward the roll-up door, then paused and looked back at Evan. Kid, he said, what's your sister's name? Evan's throat tightened. Mia. Clay nodded once as if filing it where it mattered. Mia stays safe. You have my word. Evan hated how much he wanted to believe that. The roll-up door started to rise, letting cold night air spill in. Outside, the Harleys lined up again, lights low, bodies set. And somewhere out there, the people hunting them were watching the clock. 10 minutes. Depot, where the boy's family pays. Clay swung onto his bike. Mercer climbed into his SUV, the decoy USB tucked close. Nora stood in the doorway of the clubhouse, clutching the real drive, watching them go like she was watching a surgery where the patient could bleed out at any second. Clay's engine surged, and just as the team rolled out, another buzz hit the phone on the table. A second message. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a photo. Evan leaned forward, heart slamming, as the biker holding the phone whispered, voice cracking, "They're at your door." The photo on the screen wasn't blurry. That was the worst part. It was a clean shot from a hallway camera, someone's ring, someone's peephole cam, something. Evan saw the chipped beige paint of Building C like it was in his face. He saw the crooked 3C sticker on the doorframe his mom had put up because the numbers kept falling off. And he saw two men standing there like they belonged. One leaned in close to the door, head tilted like he was listening for breathing. The other stood half a step back, shoulders relaxed, hands down, calm, patient. Evan's throat closed. His voice broke. "That's my door." Nora's face went white. She grabbed the phone, staring at the image like she could will it to change. Rook said they were watching the stairwell. How did they? Another message popped under the photo. "Open up." Clay was already gone. The bikes had already rolled out. The roll-up door was already down again, sealing Nora, Mercer, Evan, and a handful of bikers inside. Evan lurched up from the chair, ankle screaming. "I have to go." A biker stepped in front of him instantly. Not aggressive, just immovable. "Sit down." Evan shoved past him, panic making him stupid. Another biker blocked him, wider. Evan swung his head toward Nora, desperate. "Nora, please." "My mom. Mia." Nora grabbed Evan by the shoulders and forced him to look at her. "Evan," she said sharp, "if you run out of here, you won't reach them. You'll die in the street and they'll still be at your door." Evan's eyes burned. "Then what do I do?" Nora turned, phone in hand, and moved fast toward the back office where the monitors were. The shaved head guy was already pulling up live feeds from the team at Evan's building. On the screen, Riverton Pines, Building C, front entrance, side entrance, parking lot, stairwell landing. Rook's team was there, shadows in corners, helmets off, faces hidden under hoodies now, blending like they belonged. They weren't rushing. They weren't doing anything that looked like a biker movie. They were doing what Clay said. Covering. A message crackled through the clubhouse speaker, Rook's voice, low and controlled. "They're at 3C, 2 males. One is the bus guy. Other is unknown." Evan's stomach dropped. The bus guy? He's there. Nora's grip tightened on the phone. "They split," Rook's voice continued. "We didn't see them come through Main. Could be inside already. Could be stairs from basement access." Mercer stepped closer, face hard. "Basement access?" The shaved-head biker nodded. "Some of those buildings have a maintenance corridor. Old keys. Easy if you've got a contact." Evan felt sick. "They're going to knock. My mom will open." Nora snapped into action. She shoved the phone into Evan's hand. Mercer's line, unlocked. "Call her," Nora ordered. "Now!" Evan's fingers fumbled. His phone was dead. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped the clubhouse phone. He hit call. It rang. Once, twice. Evan held his breath so hard his ribs ached. Third ring. Fourth. Come on. Then, click. "Hello?" His mother's voice, tired and instantly alarmed. Evan? Evan's eyes flooded. Mom, don't open the door. Don't. What? Evan, what's happening? There are men outside, Evan whispered, voice cracking. Do you hear knocking? Don't open it. Lock everything. Take Mia into the bathroom. Now. A pause. Then his mother's voice lowered, fear sharpening it. How do you know that? Mom, please, Evan said. Just do it. Do it now. He heard movement on her end, shuffling, hurried steps. Mia, his mom called, trying to keep her voice calm. Baby, come here. Evan swallowed hard. Mom, stay quiet. Don't talk through the door. Don't. A knock hit the line. Not loud, not angry. A polite knock. Evan's heart stopped. His mother froze on the other end. Someone's. No, Evan hissed. Don't answer. Bathroom. Lock it. He heard his sister's small voice in the background, sleepy and confused. Mom? Evan squeezed his eyes shut so hard it hurt. Mia, hey. His voice broke again. Mia, do what Mom says, okay? Go with her. Mia's voice was faint. Evan? I'm okay, Evan lied. Just listen to Mom. Nora hovered close, one hand on Evan's shoulder like she could keep him from falling apart. Another knock. Then a voice, muffled through the phone, distant, coming from Evan's apartment door. Ma'am, sorry to bother you this late. We're looking for Evan. Evan's blood turned to ice. The voice was smooth, practiced. The bus man. Evan's mother whispered, barely audible. Evan, they're saying your name. Evan's chest felt like it was collapsing. Mom, don't respond. Don't make a sound. The voice outside continued, still polite. We're friends of his. It's important. We just need to talk. Evan's mom whispered, Friends? Evan almost laughed, pure desperation. No, Mom, no. A second voice joined in, lower, closer to the door. We know he's not home. We just need to make sure you're okay. Mercer leaned in and mouthed, Put her on speaker. Nora shook her head. Too risky. Evan swallowed and whispered, Mom, go to the bathroom. Lock it. Take Mia. Get low. Don't hang up. He heard his mother moving again, faster now, panic finally overtaking confusion. The voice outside changed slightly, still calm, but with a sharper edge underneath. Ma'am, the busman said, if you don't answer, we'll have to involve building security. Nora's eyes narrowed. They're bluffing. Mercer's expression didn't change. Or they have someone inside. On the monitor, Rook's team shifted positions subtly. One shadow moved up the stairwell, another edged closer to the hallway. Rook's voice came through again, controlled. We have visual. 2 at door. No third yet. We're not engaging unless they breach. Evan whispered into the phone. Mom, are you in the bathroom? A shaky breath. Yes, Mia's here. The door's locked. Mia coughed, small, wheezy. Evan's stomach twisted. Does she have her inhaler? His mom's voice cracked. It's on the table. Nora's face tightened. She mouthed, asthma. Evan's throat closed. Mom, keep Mia calm, slow breaths. Outside, the busman's polite mask finally slipped. The next sound wasn't a knock. It was a metallic scrape, something sliding into the door's edge, a tool, a thin pry bar, or a card. Evan's mother sucked in a breath. There, stay in the bathroom, Evan whispered, voice shaking. Don't move. On the monitor, Rook's shadow moved faster now, stepping into the hallway angle. Another biker's phone lifted, camera aimed. Rook's voice was low, deadly calm. They're tampering with the lock. Mercer's jaw tightened. Now. Nora grabbed the radio on the table and pressed the button with a trembling finger. Rook, she said, if they breach, you stop them, whatever it takes. Rook didn't answer with emotion. Copy. Evan pressed the phone to his ear, hearing his sister's breathing, thin and scared. He pictured her in that tiny bathroom, his mom trying to cover her mouth so she wouldn't cough loud enough to give them away. Then the busman outside said something that made Evan's skin crawl. Tell Evan, he said softly through the door, that the depot offer expires in 2 minutes. Evan's eyes snapped open, wild. They weren't just threatening, they were communicating. Through his mother. They wanted him to hear. Mercer looked at Evan, voice low. They're trying to force Clay to rush, to make mistakes. Evan's hands shook so badly the phone rattled against his cheek. Mom, he whispered, don't make a sound. Whatever happens, don't open it. A loud crack hit the line, wood splintering. Evan's mother gasped. On the monitor, the door to 3C flexed inward a fraction. Rook's voice came through, sharp but controlled. "They're breaching." Evan's chest stopped working. Nora's face went hard and she whispered like a prayer and a promise at the same time. "Please be fast." And then, on the monitor, Rook stepped into the hallway light, camera up, voice calm as ice. "Gentlemen," he said, "step away from that door." The two men froze. The busman turned slowly, and he smiled like he'd been waiting for exactly this. On Evan's phone line, the sound of his mother's breathing filled the silence like a metronome counting down to something terrible. In the clubhouse, nobody spoke. All eyes were locked on the monitor feed from Building C, third-floor hallway. Rook stood under the weak yellow ceiling light like he'd stepped into a stage he didn't want, phone held high, camera recording. Behind him, just out of frame, Santos and the others were positioned to cover angles, stairwell, corridor turn, the blind spot by the trash chute. The two men at apartment 3C paused mid-breach. The busman turned slowly. He didn't look surprised. He looked amused, like the confrontation was part of the plan. "Gentlemen," Rook repeated, voice calm, not raised, "step away from that door." The busman's smile widened. He kept his hands visible, fingers spread like a peace offering. He took one step back from the lock. "Whoa," he said, soft laugh. "We don't want trouble." Rook didn't move. "Then stop." The second man, taller, quieter, shifted his weight toward the stairwell without looking like he was moving. His eyes scanned Rook's phone, then the hallway corners. He was counting, the same way predators count. The busman lifted his chin toward Rook's camera. "You recording me?" "Yeah," Rook said, "and the plate downstairs, and the faces, and the tool in your hand." The busman glanced down at his hand like he'd forgotten he was holding the thin pry tool. Then he chuckled and let it drop to the carpet with an exaggerated little clink. "Misunderstanding," he said. Rook's voice didn't change. "Leave." The busman's smile thinned. "Can't do that." In Evan's ear, his mother whispered, "Evan, what's happening?" Evan could barely get air. "Mom, stay quiet. Don't come out." The busman on the monitor stepped slightly toward the door again, careful, controlled, like he was testing the leash. "Listen," he said, voice turning friendly again. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We just need a conversation with Evan. He's in trouble. We're trying to help." Rook's eyes stayed dead. "You tried to help with a pry bar." The busman's gaze flicked to the peephole on 3C. Then, very subtly, he turned his head toward the door like he was speaking to someone inside. "Ma'am," he said, gentle. "If you're in there, you can come out. You're safe. We're not police, but we can keep your boy out of jail. He took something from the hospital. That's serious." Nora's jaw clenched in the clubhouse. "He's trying to bait her." Mercer's voice was low and lethal. "Tell Rook to mention federal." Nora didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on the monitor. Evan whispered into the phone, "Mom, don't listen, don't—" A small cough came through the line. "Mia." Evan's chest tightened painfully. On the monitor, the tall, quiet man shifted again, edging closer to Rook's flank. Not rushing, just closing space. Rook noticed. He didn't turn his head. He just angled his stance subtly, like he'd expected it. "Back," Rook said. The busman's smile returned, but his eyes sharpened. "You bikers sure like acting official." Rook's voice stayed flat. "I'm acting recorded." The busman's face changed at that, annoyance flickering through the charm. Then he did something worse than getting angry. He sighed like a tired parent and pulled his phone out. He tapped the screen twice. In the clubhouse, at the same moment, another phone buzzed on the table. Nora snatched it up. Unknown number, a video call request. Mercer leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Don't answer." Nora's thumb hovered anyway, because Evan's phone line suddenly went very quiet, and that quiet had a shape. "Mia?" Evan whispered. "Mom?" His mother's voice came back, shaking. They're saying he can see us." Evan's blood froze. Nora's voice broke, sharp. "Rook, check for a third. Check the peephole cam." Rook's voice came through the clubhouse speaker, controlled. "Already looking." On the monitor, the busman lifted his phone and angled it slightly toward the apartment door, like he was demonstrating. "You don't have to hide," he said softly toward the wood. "We already know you're in there." Evan's hands went numb. "How?" he whispered. "How do they—" Mercer's eyes were cold. "They have access, building, camera, maintenance, something." Nora's fingers curled into a fist around the real USB in her pocket. "This is why the hospital security chief mattered," she whispered. "It's all connected." The busman looked back to Rook, still holding his phone up. "You're gonna move," the busman said, voice calm. "Or she's gonna move." Rook's eyes narrowed. "That's a threat." The busman's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's reality." The taller man took another small step toward Rook, closing the gap to striking distance. Rook's phone stayed up, camera steady, but Rook's other hand dropped slightly, out of frame, toward his waistband. Not a gun, something smaller. Mercer's voice in the clubhouse went low. "He's going to use spray." Nora's eyes widened. "Rook, don't—" Too late. The tall man lunged, fast, silent, direct. He went for Rook's phone first, grab and smash, because cameras were the only thing stopping this from being clean. But Rook moved like he'd been waiting for the exact angle of that lunge. He pivoted hard, bringing his shoulder in, letting the tall man's momentum carry him past. And then Rook's hand snapped up with a short canister, a burst, a white cloud. The tall man recoiled instantly, hands flying to his face, choking, staggering back like his eyes had been set on fire. The busman's smile vanished. His head snapped toward the apartment door, calculating, furious. He stepped in and slammed his shoulder into the wood. The door flexed again. Inside the bathroom, Evan heard his mother's breath hitch. "Evan," she whispered, "he's hitting the door." Evan's throat tore. "Mom, stay." Another slam. Wood cracked. Rook recovered fast, coughing, eyes watering from the blowback. He surged toward the busman, phone still recording. "Step away," Rook barked, voice finally rising. "Now!" The busman spun and shoved Rook hard, sending him into the wall. Rook's phone jolted, but the camera kept rolling. Santos moved in from the side, finally visible, grabbing the busman's arm and yanking him back. The busman twisted free like a snake, and in that instant he reached into his jacket and pulled something out. Not a gun, a small black device. He clicked it once. In the clubhouse, the lights flickered, just once, like the building itself had blinked. Mercer's head snapped up. "No." Nora's eyes went wide. "What is that?" Mercer's voice went tight. "A jammer." Evan's phone line crackled. His mother's voice broke into static. "Mom!" Evan shouted. "Mom!" Static. Nora grabbed Evan's wrist. "It's cutting signals." Mercer's face went stone. "Which means he's not just threatening your family. He's isolating them." On the monitor, the busman backed away from the apartment door, device still in hand, eyes flicking to the stairwell. Rook and Santos closed in. The busman lifted the device slightly and smiled again. Cold now, no charm left. "You've got two choices," he said. "Let me walk away, or I start the fire." Evan's chest seized. Nora's voice barely came out. "Fire?" Mercer's eyes locked on the busman's hand. "That's not a jammer," he said slowly. "That's an ignition trigger." Evan couldn't breathe. On the monitor, the busman tilted his head toward apartment 3C like he was talking to Evan through the door. "Depot," he mouthed, and then he pressed the button again. Downstairs, on the building entrance camera feed, a car's headlights flared, then a sudden bright flash under the front stairwell. A bloom of orange. Smoke. Fire. In the clubhouse, Nora's hand flew to her mouth. Evan made a sound that wasn't words, because the screen showed the flame licking up the stairwell like it had been waiting there, and his mother and sister were still inside. Evan didn't remember getting to his feet. 1 second he was staring at the monitor, watching orange bloom under the stairwell like a nightmare with a fuse, and the next he was lunging toward the clubhouse door, body moving before his mind could catch up. Nora grabbed him around the chest and held him back with everything she had. "Evan, no!" she shouted, voice cracking. Evan fought her, wild. "My mom, Mia, let go!" Mercer snapped. "Hold him!" 2 bikers moved in, not rough, just unbreakable. Evan thrashed anyway, choking on air, eyes locked on the screen as smoke thickened in the building entrance feed. On the 3rd-floor hallway camera, the busman was already moving, not panicking, executing. He backed away from Santos and Rook, stepping into the stairwell like he'd rehearsed the escape route. The tall, quiet man, half blind from spray, stumbled after him, wiping his eyes, coughing. Rook staggered forward, eyes watering, voice hoarse. "Santos, stairs, don't let him—" But the busman didn't run. He walked down like he owned the building, and the device in his hand, the ignition trigger, sat loose in his fingers like a remote control for hell. Mercer grabbed a radio and pressed the button hard enough to bend plastic. "Rook," Mercer barked, "where's the fire source? Identify, now!" Rook's voice came through, broken by coughing. "Front stairwell. Looks like under the first landing." Santos cut in, harsher. "Accelerant. They staged it. It's climbing fast." In the clubhouse, Clay's absence hit like a missing limb. The depot team was out there running their decoy play, and now the real play was burning Evan's life down. Nora's eyes were wide, but her hands were steady now. She wasn't just scared. She was in her element, triage brain. "Mercer," she said, voice sharp, "we need fire department." Mercer's jaw clenched. "We can't trust—" "Do you trust smoke?" Nora snapped. "Do you trust a child's lungs?" That shut him up. He pulled his phone out anyway, thumb moving fast. Evan strained against the bikers. "Call them! Call anyone!" Mercer didn't look at Evan. "I'm calling, and I'm calling it in a way they can't ignore." He spoke low into the phone, controlled, like he was reading a script he'd used before. "Multi-unit apartment fire, active threat on scene, potential arson device, occupants trapped. Send fire and EMS now. I'm federal." Nora grabbed another radio. "Duke," she called, voice tight. "Ari, what's your position?" A beat. Then Duke's voice came through, clipped. "We're 2 blocks out. We saw smoke. We're moving in." Nora's throat tightened. "Get to apartment 3C, bathroom. Mother and child inside." Evan's chest seized. "Bathroom, yes," Mercer cut in. "Stay off the main stairwell. Fire's staged there." Duke didn't ask questions. "Copy." On the monitor, the building entrance camera feed showed people spilling out now. Neighbors stumbling into the lot in pajamas, coughing, faces lit orange by flame. Someone screamed. Someone fell. Evan's nails dug into a biker's forearm. "Please," he choked. "Please." Nora stepped close to Evan, eyes locked on his. "Listen to me. Smoke rises. The bathroom is the best place if the door's sealed. Your mom did the right thing. We just have to get them out before the air turns." Evan's voice cracked. "Mia's asthma." "I know," Nora said, and her voice softened for half a second. "I know. That's why we move fast." On the third-floor feed, Santos and Rook had pushed toward the stairwell door, but the busman had gotten distance. The hall itself was starting to haze, thin smoke creeping up already because fire didn't care about floor numbers. Rook's voice came through again, strained. "He's heading down. He's trying to exit through—" Static cut the last words. Mercer's head snapped. "The device, he's still jamming." Nora's eyes narrowed. "If he's jamming, he's close. He wants the cameras blind." Evan's mind screamed the same thought. He's still in the building. He can still go to 3C. On the building entrance feed, flames surged up the stairwell like a living thing. Then the image jerked. Someone moved the camera, or smoke hit the lens. The view blurred with gray. Evan's stomach turned. "I can't see—" The shaved-head biker at the monitor zoomed another feed, parking lot angle, showing the backside of the building. A maintenance door. A shadow moved there. Duke's voice came through, low and urgent now. "We're at the back. Maintenance door is chained." Ari added, "We've got bolt cutters." Nora leaned in, voice hard. "Cut it! Go!" Evan's throat burned. He could taste smoke in his imagination. He could hear his sister coughing even when he couldn't. Mercer's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then snapped his head up. "Fire's dispatched. 2 minutes out." 2 minutes. Evan felt like he was falling. On the backside feed, Duke and Ari appeared, hoods up, moving like shadows. Bolt cutters flashed. The chain snapped. The maintenance door swung open. Smoke rolled out, thin at first, then thick like a warning. Duke disappeared inside. Ari followed. Evan's lungs locked. "They went in." Nora's voice dropped. "They know what they're doing." Evan couldn't stop shaking. "They're not firefighters." "No," Nora whispered, "but they're not cowards." On the third-floor hallway feed, Santos was still there, coughing, wiping his eyes. He turned toward apartment 3C, toward the door Evan's mother was behind. The busman was gone from that angle. But the door to 3C shuddered once, a heavy impact from the outside. Nora's face drained. "No!" Evan screamed. "Mom!" The line was dead, static, nothing. The door shuddered again. Santos sprinted, grabbing the busman, because the busman had come back, slipping through smoke like he knew exactly how long he had before sirens arrived. The busman shoved Santos off with savage force, and for the first time, he looked frantic, because the fire wasn't just leverage anymore. It was chaos, and chaos could hide mistakes. He slammed the door again. Then he pressed his ear to the wood like he was listening for panic. Evan's vision tunneled. He couldn't breathe. Nora grabbed the radio. "Santos, stop him!" Santos's voice came through, coughing, furious. "He's got something in his hand." A sharp click. Nora froze. "What?" Mercer's eyes went wide. "He's trying to lock them in." Evan made a sound like an animal. On the backside feed, Duke's voice suddenly cut through, loud, urgent, breathing hard. "Found the stairwell access from maintenance. Smoke is heavy. We're climbing." Ari added. "We're on second." Their voices cut to static again. Mercer's jaw clenched. "He's pulsing the jammer." Nora's face hardened with a kind of rage Evan had never seen on a nurse. "He's using your family as a timer." Evan's knees buckled. The bikers caught him before he hit the floor. "Evan," Nora said, voice low and intense, "if your mom hears you screaming through the door, she will try to move. She will open something. She will make noise. She will risk the bathroom. You need to be silent and strong right now." Evan's eyes flooded. He nodded once, tiny, broken. On the third-floor feed, Santos finally got leverage. He wrapped the busman's arm and wrenched it up. The device clattered to the carpet. The busman swung an elbow back, catching Santos in the jaw. Santos stumbled. The busman lunged for the device, and Rook appeared from the smoke like a ghost, grabbing the busman from behind and dragging him back with pure hate in his grip. Rook's voice was a rasp through the radio. "Got him!" Santos kicked the device away. The busman thrashed, snarling, losing control fully now. "You don't understand what you're protecting." Rook slammed him into the wall so hard the hallway camera shook. "We understand plenty," Rook hissed. The busman's head snapped toward apartment 3C again, obsessed, and then, through the smoke haze, sirens finally started to wail in the distance, not close, but coming. The busman's face twisted, and Evan saw it, the moment he realized he couldn't finish clean. So he changed the goal. He stopped fighting Rook. He smiled, bloody, ugly, and said something Evan couldn't hear through the silent feed. But Mercer read his lips. Mercer went still. He said, "It's already done." Nora's breath caught. What does that mean? At the same moment, the backside camera feed flickered to show a tiny bathroom window on the third floor, Evan's apartment line, fogged from steam and smoke. And behind that fog, a silhouette moved, small, a child. Evan's heart stopped. Then another silhouette, his mother, lifting something toward the window, frantic. Nora leaned forward so hard her hands shook. "She's trying to signal." Evan's throat tore open. "Mom!" The jammed line gave nothing back. On the back feed, a firefighter truck finally swung into frame, red lights cutting through smoke, hoses, men running, shouts, and at the same time, Duke's voice cracked through the radio again, broken and breathless but alive. "Third floor, we're at the hallway. We see 3C." Evan's whole body locked. Nora gripped the radio. "Bathroom. They're in the bathroom." Duke's voice was tight. "Doors hot, smoke heavy, we're going in." The monitor showed Duke and Ari, shadows through haze, at Evan's door. Then the feed glitched, smoke and motion swallowing detail. Evan couldn't see. He couldn't hear. He could only stare at the screen as if staring could pull his family out of fire. And then, finally, on the backside feed, the bathroom window popped open. Smoke poured out like a scream. A hand appeared, then another, and then Duke's arm reached through the frame, pulling someone forward, Evan's mother, coughing hard, eyes wide, hair plastered to her face with sweat. She clung to the frame like it was the edge of a cliff, and behind her, a smaller shape struggled, Mia, too small, too weak, coughing so hard her body folded. Nora was already moving, grabbing a medkit, voice sharp. "Get oxygen ready!" Evan stood up without realizing again, whispering, "Mia, Mia." On the monitor, Duke hauled Mia through the window carefully, cradling her like she was glass. Ari supported the mother. Smoke surged behind them. The firefighter team below raised a ladder into position, and just as it looked like the worst was over, the busman on the third-floor hallway feed threw his head back and laughed, silent on camera, but loud in Evan's imagination, because he knew the chaos had bought him something. Time. and time was what monsters used to disappear. The sirens outside grew louder, but inside the building everything still looked wrong, like the world had split into two speeds. On the backside feed, firefighters swarmed the ladder. Someone strapped an oxygen mask over Mia's face. Evan's mother clung to the ladder rail, coughing so hard her shoulders shook. Duke and Ari stayed close, one hand steadying her, the other shielding Mia's head from the window frame as smoke kept pouring out behind them. In the clubhouse, Evan stopped breathing for a second and didn't even realize it until Nora shoved the portable oxygen toward the screen like she could send it through. "Come on," Nora whispered, voice tight with helpless rage. "Come on, baby." Mia's chest fluttered under the mask, little fast breaths. Her eyes were wide and watery, trying to focus through smoke and fear. Evan's throat was raw. "Mia, it's okay, it's okay." He didn't know who he was talking to, the screen, the air, God. Because Mia couldn't hear him. Nora moved like she'd been born in emergencies. She tore open a kit, checked tubing, grabbed a pulse ox, her hands steady even as her eyes shook. Mercer stood still, jaw clenched, staring at the third-floor hallway feed where the busman was restrained against the wall. Rook's forearm jammed into his collarbone. Santos held the device they'd kicked away, gloved now, like it was radioactive. The busman's smile was gone, but the satisfaction stayed, because his plan had already done its damage. On the third-floor hallway feed, smoke hazed the camera, making the scene grainy. Through it, the busman lifted his head and said something again, slow, deliberate, so whoever watched later would understand. Mercer read his lips without blinking. "He's saying, 'You're too late.'" Nora snapped her head around. "Late for what?" Mercer's voice dropped, harsh. "Late to stop the chain." Clay's name hit the room like a missing bullet. Evan turned sharply. "Clay's at the depot." Mercer's eyes stayed on the hallway feed. And this was the distraction. Nora's face tightened, realization snapping into place. They threatened the family to force a choice, but the real target was the drive. Evan's stomach turned. "But the real USB is here." "With you?" Nora's fingers tightened reflexively around her pocket. Mercer's gaze cut to her. "Is it?" Nora's eyes flashed. "Yes." Mercer's eyes sharpened further. "Show me." Nora froze for half a beat, then pulled the real USB out and held it up. Tiny, black, ordinary. Mercer's shoulders loosened a fraction, but not enough. "Good." At that exact moment, one of the bikers at the monitors swore under his breath. "Clay's feed," he said. "We lost Clay's feed." Nora spun. "What do you mean, lost?" The biker tapped the screen, cycling cameras. The depot feed, Clay's phone stream, was gone. Just a frozen frame of wet asphalt and streetlight glare. Mercer's face went hard. He went dark. Evan's heart slammed. No, Clay can handle." Nora grabbed the radio. "Clay, respond." Static. "Clay," she repeated sharper. "Status." Static again. Evan's mother on the backside feed finally reached the ground. Paramedics guided her to an ambulance. She kept turning her head, searching the lot like she expected Evan to burst out of the smoke. Mia was carried on a stretcher, oxygen mask still on, small hands curled into fists, chest rising and falling fast but steadying. Nora's eyes flicked between the feeds like she was being ripped in half. Mercer's voice went low. "Rook." Rook's voice came through the radio, still coughing, still holding the busman. "Yeah." Mercer's jaw tightened. "Ask him who he is." Rook shifted the phone camera closer to the busman's face. "Who are you?" Rook said, voice flat. "Really?" The busman's eyes were bright with something ugly. "You don't get my name," he mouthed. Rook's hand tightened on his collar. "Try me." The busman smiled, thin, controlled, then glanced toward the stairwell like he was checking time. Mercer stared at him like he could see the wiring inside his skull. Then Mercer said, almost to himself, "He's not the boss. He's just the courier." Nora's eyes widened. "Courier for who?" Mercer didn't answer. Because the clubhouse door suddenly opened, not forced, not kicked, opened like someone belonged there. The room snapped to attention, hands moved, bodies shifted, silence turned sharp. Clay walked in, rain dripping from his jacket, mud splattered on his boots, a small cut at his hairline, his face calm, but his eyes colder than Evan had seen them yet. And in his hand, Clay held Mercer's decoy evidence bag. Empty. Clay set it on the table with a soft slap. Evan stood up so fast his ankle screamed, but he didn't care. "Clay, what happened?" Clay looked at him for a long beat, then spoke to Mercer instead. "They didn't come for the decoy," Clay said quietly. "They came for you." Mercer's face tightened. "They didn't get me." Clay's gaze stayed flat. "No, they got something else." Nora's hand went to her pocket instantly. The real USB was gone. Nora's face drained so fast it looked like someone turned off the color. "No," she whispered. "No, no, it was—" She patted her scrubs, searched both pockets, her tote, her hands shaking now like they finally caught up to her. Evan's stomach dropped into free fall. "Nora," Nora's voice cracked. I had it the whole time." Mercer's eyes hardened. "Pickpocket." Clay nodded once. "During the chaos, fire, radios, everyone watching the screens, somebody walked through this room and nobody saw them." Nora stared at Clay, horror mixing with rage. "Who?" Clay didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer to the table and looked at the monitors again. Mia being loaded into the ambulance, Evan's mother being checked by EMTs. "Your family's alive," Clay said to Evan, voice steady. "They're going to the hospital." Evan's throat tightened so hard he could barely speak. "Can I—" "Yes," Clay said, "but not alone." Nora finally found her voice again, trembling. "The drive. If it's gone, we're done." Mercer shook his head slowly. "Not done," Nora snapped. "How can you say that?" Mercer looked at the manila folder Evan had carried, the physical paperwork, still on the table. "Because they stole the USB. They didn't steal the folder." Clay's eyes narrowed. "Folder still has enough?" Mercer exhaled through his nose. "Enough to force warrants, enough to force internal audits, enough to light a fire that doesn't go out." Nora's face tightened. "But the USB had the clean proof, names, transfers." Clay's gaze went distant for a second, then returned. "Then we get it back." Rook's voice came through again from Building C, strained. "What about this one?" He jerked the busman's head toward the camera. "He started an arson." Mercer's voice went ice cold. "Hold him. Don't let him disappear into misdemeanor paperwork." Clay stepped toward the camera feed, eyes on the busman. "He's going to talk," Clay said quietly. "He doesn't know it yet." The busman's smile flickered for the first time. Evan's whole body shook. "My mom, Mia." Nora grabbed Evan's arm, voice softer, real. "We go to them now. We make sure they're stable." Evan's eyes burned. "And then?" Clay's voice came from behind them, low and final. "Then you decide what kind of life you want after this." Evan turned. "What does that mean?" Clay held his gaze. "You gave up your seat," Clay said. "You stepped into something big without knowing it. Most people would have looked away. You didn't." Evan swallowed, bitter. "And my family almost burned." Clay nodded once. "Yeah, that's the cost of being seen." Mercer cut in, sharp. "We don't have time for philosophy. They took the drive. That means they're moving evidence right now." Nora's face hardened again. "At the hospital." Mercer nodded. "Or out of the city." Clay looked at Evan. "You go to the hospital. You see your family. You breathe." Evan's voice was thin. "And you?" Clay's jaw flexed. "We hunt the drive." Evan's fists clenched. "I want in." Clay stared at him for a long beat, then shook his head, once, not cruel, just absolute. "No," Clay said, "not tonight." Evan's throat tightened. "Why not?" Clay stepped closer and lowered his voice so only Evan heard. "Because tonight you already paid," Clay said. "And if you stay in this, they won't threaten you next time. They'll just take you." Evan's eyes stung. He wanted to argue. He wanted to scream, but his legs finally gave up, and he sank back into the chair, shaking. Nora knelt in front of him, hands on his knees, eyes locked on his. "Evan," she said, "you saved me on that bus. Then you saved your family by not making the wrong move." Evan swallowed hard. "I didn't save anyone. I just stood up." Nora's eyes softened. "That's how it starts." Mercer turned to Clay. "We need a name, a route, a contact." Clay nodded to the shaved-head biker at the monitors. "Pull footage, anyone who came in during the fire window, every angle, no gaps." The biker nodded, already scrubbing frames. On the monitors, the ambulance doors closed. Mia's small face was visible through the window for a second, mask on, eyes tired but alive. Evan's chest finally let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped all night. Clay put a hand on Evan's shoulder, not gentle, not rough, just present. "You want to do something?" Clay asked quietly. Evan nodded, throat tight. Clay's voice was steady. "Then when your sister wakes up, you tell her the truth. You tell her you didn't sit because someone else needed it more, and you tell her she matters enough that people will ride into a storm to keep her breathing." Evan blinked hard. Outside, engines started again, lower now, purposeful. Nora stood, wiping her face, turning back into a nurse like she could stitch the world back together. Mercer grabbed the folder and tucked it under his arm. Clay looked toward the door, then back once more. "Kid," he said, "this ends." Evan whispered, "How?" Clay's eyes went cold. "Because they made one mistake," Clay said. "What mistake?" Evan asked. Clay didn't answer immediately. He nodded toward the hallway feed where the busman was pinned, coughing, face smeared, eyes still defiant. "They tried to burn a mother and a child," Clay said quietly. "That's the kind of mistake that makes everybody choose a side." And then Clay walked out into the rain, engines rising behind him like thunder that had learned how to aim.